በመቀጠል የተከበሩ አቶ ደርሶ ጎና
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I want to thank also His Excellency the Prime Minister for being here to respond to our questions. I'll pose my questions. Our country, Ethiopia, to clear it from destructive forces, the government is engaged in law enforcement operations, and for the leadership you gave and for the victory that we had, I would want to say congratulations to you, Prime Minister, and also to protect the sovereignty of the country, our army, the pride of Ethiopia, would want to pay my tribute with honor. Excellency, Prime Minister, our country has been suffering from terrorist acts of TPLF and the measures taken against those acts of terrorism is there, and we recognize that, we're in approval of that, but I have the following questions. First, the perpetrators that engaged to destroy the constitutional order and system of the country and engaged in lots of terrible crimes and attacking our military force and also sending criminal and terrorist groups all over the country, and the greedy, corrupt TPLF, just like ICIS, and also the Nigerian Boko Haram and the Somali Al-Shabaab. Why is it that we have not yet designated it as a terrorist organization? And secondly, the attack against our northern division of our army, the high military officials, high-ranking army officials, why is their case being handled by the High Court? Why is it not being handled by a special military court? And thirdly, in the past 2 years, there's been a lot of reform work in the army. A lot of work has been done to make it free of political influences. However, during the attack against the military, those involved were part of the military from the main office even here in Ethiopia. So how successful has our reform work been in the army? And fourth, the traitor and Banda TPLF has been engaged with several acts of crimes, but the government gave peace chance and handled the case with a lot of patience. However, the patience of the government, they say, has given these terrorist organization time to organize, to engage in such evil acts of attack. If you'd elaborate. Thank you. Honorable Wizaro Mesaret Getachew. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I want to thank His Excellency the Prime Minister for being here to answer our questions. Excellency Prime Minister, the very fast campaign that we just engaged in, and I congratulate you for the victory, and also the Amhara region militia and our army. We take pride in the victory, and I would read my question first. At the moment in Ethiopia, the traitors are engaged in lots of destruction, and many civilians have died, and this has caused severe psychological pressure on the country. So and also they attacked our army forces that did not expect the attack in any way. They have killed many. So what's the government doing to make sure that they face justice at a military court? And secondly, those groups that want to dismantle the country and engaging in acts of genocide, these are TPLF and Onagshane, and this has been very clear to everybody. Accordingly, why have not we yet designated it as a genocide organization, and how are we going to hold them legally accountable? And thirdly, the extremist TPLF group, the actions taken against it, though was very successful in a very small amount of time, but rocket attacks against Bahada, Gondar, and Eritrea, and this has continued. How are we going to stop these acts of violence? Thank you. Honorable Ato Mesfin Meshasha. Thank you. I want to thank also the Prime Minister for being here to respond to our questions. I will read my question. Our country being engaged in a path of change, and works have been made to disrupt our efforts of development, and evil forces are engaged in acts of violence, forcing the government to take actions. However, when the government's attention is focused on the northern part of Ethiopia, there could be other forces from within and outside that want to take action against our huge projects. How prepared are we to protect ourselves? Thank you, and Honorable Ato Zewdu Kabere. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. First of all, for the attack against our northern division of our army by internal traitors, for the work, for the resolute leadership that you gave, and also for the powerful victory that we registered. I honor you for that. Pose my question. I'll read it first. In order to reverse the development activities that were engaged in, various acts of violence has been conducted by TPLF and its friends, but it has not been successful. But recently, in various parts of Ethiopia, many civilians have been killed. Your Excellency Prime Minister, these destructive forces that operate under TPLF and also TPLF leaders, after going to Tigray, they're engaged in all sorts of evil acts all around the country, and they were preparing themselves for a war. But should we have given them ample time to prepare for the evil acts? And secondly, the acts of violence that they were engaged in, with dreams to assume power, to come back to power, and they're engaged into all sorts of divisive forces. So, and also the destructive media works that they're engaged in, we fear that it might cause disturbance in our relationship internationally. So what is being done to avert that? And thirdly, TPLF, in the name of democracy and federalism, it had hid themselves, posing itself as working for the country, but disguising itself under ethnic organizations. It's been engaged in destructive acts all over. This has been very clear. So accordingly, the government, why don't we designate it as a terrorist organization? Thank you.
Honorable members of the House, I would like to thank you for giving me the chance to respond to your questions. The questions raised are directly related to the situations we're in at the moment, but for the past 2.5 years we have been in the journey of reform, and it has been in several challenges. And I will also highlight on where we are right now, and I believe that's important. Most of the questions talk about the stance of the government saving the lives of citizens, and these are questions of livelihood. As much as possible, if not everything, I'll try to show you how it looked like from the beginning. First of all, in the past 27 years, the inhuman treatments that took place in the country and the thirst for democracy and good governance in our country is definitely not what I will be covering, because the House knows it very well, despite the fact that the people might from time to time forget what they've been into. I'm sure they will remember, and I will not talk much about that. 1 or 2 months after the reform will be the timeline where I'll begin my narration. As you may remember, 2.5 years ago, a month or two before the reform, there were several conflicts, expropriations taking place in the country, and burying several bodies in one hole, suppressing and subjecting people to cruelty. It was widely observed. Following the reform, we have faced several challenges. The trend that has continued till day, the people who graduated from the same college are causing these acts, and we have to remember this background. Within that time, there were several complainings, warnings, and the tactic they used was to make the people worry, to arrest a lot of people altogether and to suppress the situation. For example, during the time of the celebration of Recha, the institution that existed to safeguard the country would print so many flags of opposing teams and make them carry it on the street and would arrest them and use it as a context. And other locations they will arrest a lot of people for carrying a flag that doesn't have the emblem. This affected the need for the people for change. The need for change did not stop that need. Because of that, right before the reform, there were discussions and attempts for a coup. That discussion for coup d'etat, when it was heard by Prime Minister Hailemariam Desalegn, said, "I'm here to serve. There is no need for a coup d'etat. If you think you don't need Hailemariam, I'm ready to leave my chair at any time," and said there's no need for it, and discussed it with the relevant people. And the rest of us were saying this is not a coup d'etat, this is a coup of a single person. How does a government coup itself? How do you coup your own intelligence? How do you wage a coup d'etat against yourself? There is no need for such discussions. It can easily be done. That was the discussion at the time. And from among them, there were individuals that did not support the issue. And the discussion of the coup d'etat was reversed. And the discussion started on who the person will be succeeding Prime Minister Hailemariam Desalegn. In order to ensure the next person will be their favorite person, there was a list of people on whom an active surveillance was done to see if they can be capable. So behind our back, with us knowing, they were surveilling us. There was a car right outside of my gate following me to my office, and it was there wherever I go. Not hidden, but in public. This was also the same for other comrades. There was no need to worry much. You don't need to spend fuel on us. There are several other matters that you need to worry about, not us. But it didn't stop there. There were more tensions, for instance, in Oromia office, the president's office, and the office of OPDO. All the towers were surrounded by shotguns. There were patrols on our gates, or the buildings around us were surrounded by surveillance. During the time, few persons sat and discussed. There could be killings at any time. The struggle we started should not be interrupted. We assumed as if we were killed, as if we were finished. We documented a video that said the government is oppressing us, is going to kill us, and so on. And we kept those videos with people close to us. And we told them to release the video as soon as if those things happen. It was clear that a danger could occur at any time. Following the surveillance, we did a discussion, we had a discussion with the rulers of EPRDF, and they released an order for arrest. This was 5-10 days before our election. There was an order to arrest. It was written. All this was intended towards removing the people wanted and to put in place persons that look like governments but puppets. Were anti this activity, and many were following the situation closely, and most of them were futile. The Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister had the desire for reform and for the reform to be successful. Not only that, since there were people coming and going between the two groups, we were sending the information they want to hear, and we were also learning about what they were doing, and it gave us time to prepare. When we moved to the election, the first election under EPRDF, for the first time in history, was directed towards brainwashing and changing the minds of people through evaluations. We're assembling a lot, but there was no fruit in those meetings. And on the day of the election, we were discussing on the criteria for election. As you might have heard, it was full of debate. It was nothing less than the war we're having at the moment. And the assembly of the junta was fighting from the side, did a widespread activity, and at a time around 10 p.m. they said we won the election and started celebrating. Before that,
it is in our dead body.
They said it's only in our dead body that these people will come to position. Everywhere you go, wherever they were dancing. After doing that, they faced an unprecedented loss, and those members of EPRDF that wanted change, reform, spearheaded the activities. EPRDF had a lot of discussions, debates to just elect one person. When we met in 4 months in Awasa, I mean, a person's perception won't change that quick. In 10 minutes, except for one person, the remaining 100% voted in just 4 months' time. But one voice was given to me. I voted for my friends. The remaining 100% voted. What does it mean? 3 months prior to that, there was not the need for that kind of debate. Had that been necessary 3 months after that, when there were votings, they would not have given their voices. I would like to make this a background for the House. The second one, after the reform, and after the reform leaders came to power, the special force was under oppression and wanted to do arrestings, surveillances, and so on. And the people of Ethiopia were oppressed and had hatred. And there were oppositions at the time. And in that situation,
የምናደርግ ከሆነ
If we did a reform in the country at that time the way it was done before, we would have destroyed each other.
የተበደለና በደልና ግፍ የሚጠላ ነገር ግን
Some were oppressed, others were privileged,
የህዝብ እልቂት ያጋጥማል።
and because the other group did not have weapons, there would have been killings in the people. So we said, let's have a reform.
ከታጠቀ ኃይል ጋር
Let's not have conservative views.
ጭቅጭቅ ንትርክ
Let's avoid debates, unnecessary debates, and let's change the narrative.
እናጥፋችሁ አንበላቸው።
So we said, let's not say we'll destroy you because you cause damage.
የደረሰበት መዓት
We
በሁለት
said
መንገድ ሊሽር ይችላል። አንድም በይቅርታ አልያም
the damage could be averted in two ways. One is vengeance, the other one is through
በደሎቻችንን ረስተን በመደመር በወንድማማችነት በፍቅር
giving a leeway.
እንሻገር።
We said, let's give them,
ያለፈውን በደል እንተው ይቅራል።
let them say
ያለፈውን
sorry.
በደል ካነሳን እግሩ የተቆረጠ አለ።
If we raise the problems of the past, they were
አባት ያጣል።
subjected to many cruelty, that lost their fathers, their mothers.
በመንግስት ምሬት ተሰደው በየባህር የቀሩ ሰዎች
And
አሉ።
there are so many people that left the country and died in the ocean, fleeing the government.
እርምጃ ከወሰደ
If we take
መተላለቅ ስለሚመጣ
vengeance, of course there would be
በደሉን አፍነን
mass death.
ሰላም ፍቅር
So
እንዲኖር
let's come
ብንሰራ
to
ይሻላል።
agreement, peace
የመጠፋፋት
and
ፖለቲካ
love.
አልጠቀመንም።
The politics of hatred never helped us.
ከዜሮ መጀመር ኢትዮጵያን ወደ
Starting
ኋላ
from
እያስቀራል
zero is pulling
ይቅር
Ethiopia backwards.
ብለን
So we said,
በብዙ
let
መድረኮች
this be it.
በብዙ መንገድ ለህዝባችን
And all
ለዚህ ኃይል
the different sessions we had, we communicated the
ካልን
same to the
በኋላ
people.
ቀጣይ
And
ስራ
after
መሆን
saying that,
ያለበት
the next
በሁሉም
action should be
ለሁሉም ከሁሉም የሆነ ሀገረ መንግስት
an
እንዲሆን።
all-inclusive government, a comprehensive one.
በሁሉም ስንል
When we say by
እያንዳንዱ ሰው
all, each and every person
ኮንትሪቢዩት
should
የሚያደርግበት
contribute a grain of sand.
ለሁሉም ስንል
When we say for
ተጠቃሚና
all,
የማይጠቀም ባለቤትና
there
ባዕድ
should not be
ጎረቤትና
discrimination
ዋነኛ
between
የሚባል
who
ሳይሆን
benefits and who
ሁሉም
don't
በኩል የሚሳተፍበት
honor
ይሁን።
and not.
ለሁሉ ስንል ደግሞ
And
ሁሉም
when we say for
የሚገለገልበት
all, we
እኩል።
said so that everyone can benefit
ይሄን ሀገረ
equitably.
መንግስት እንገንባ።
So this is what we wanted
የሚል
to
ጥያቄ
develop.
ስናነሳ
And when we raised the
ይህ
question,
ስብከት ነው፣
they
ሰባኪዎች
said,
ናቸው።
you're preaching.
ሀገር
This
መምራት
is just a
በስብከት
preach.
አይቻልም።
You cannot rule a country
ሀገር
by
መምራት
preaching.
እንደኛ ፊት ለፊት
ruling a
የምንለውን
country,
እያልን
they
ከኋላ
said,
ማፋጀት ካልሆነ በስተቀር
should be
ስለ
saying
ፍቅርና
what you
ስለ
say to the
መደመር
people
እየተናገሩ
and
ሀገር
killing
መምራት
at the back.
አይቻልም።
And they said, you cannot talk
አሉ
about love and
መንግስት
rule a
ደካማ
country.
ነው።
And they said the government is weak in the
ደካማ
end.
መንግስት ነው። በእርግጥ መንግስት ደካማ ነው።
Perhaps the government,
መንግስት
a government is
የግለሰቦች
weak. A government
የግል ብቃት የግለሰቦች
is
የግል
the
እውቀት
coming
ማለት
together
ሳይሆን
is
የተቋማት
not the
ጥንካሬ ማለት ነው።
individual's strengths,
ተቋሙን
rather it's the
እንዳልሆነ
strengths of
አድርገን ከሰራ በኋላ
institutions.
መንግስት
And
ደካማ
after
ነው የሚል
developing
ክስ
an institution
እምብዛም ውሃም
in a
ጠብ
wrong way, of course,
ተቋም የሌለው
you can
ማንኛውም
say the
መንግስት
government
ደካማ
is
ነው።
weak. A government that
ግለሰቦች
doesn't have
ምንም ቢሆኑ ምን
institutions
ማለት
is
ነው?
weak, no matter what the
በዚህ
individuals
መንገድ
are.
የነበረው
Therefore,
ሁኔታ
on
ለመቀየር
this
የነበረው
track, in order to
ፍላጎት
change
እምብዛም
the
ተቀባይነት
existing
አላገኘም።
scenario, did not receive
ከዚህ ጋር ተያይዞ የተከበረው
commencement.
ምክር ቤት በጣም ብዙ
The
የፖለቲካ
honorable
ሰዎች፣
House, many politicians,
የሚዲያ ሰዎች
media,
ለምን ቀድሞ እርምጃ አልተወሰደም?
started
አልዘገየንም
asking
ወይ? እርምጃ
why
በመወሰዱ
hasn't the
ዋጋ
government
አልከፈልንም
taken
ወይ?
actions immediately?
ቀድሞ እርምጃ መውሰድ
Was
ይቻላል
it
ነበረም
not
ወይ
possible
የሚል
to take
ጥያቄዎች
actions at
ይነሳሉ።
the time? There are questions like this
ጉዳይ
raised from time to time.
በመፈለግና በማድረግ
This
መካከል
issue has
ያለን
differences
ልዩነት
between
ካለመገንዘብ
want
ይመጣል።
and action.
መሻት ይቻላል፣
We can always
ማለም
wish
ይቻላል፣
for something. We
መፈለግ
can dream.
ይቻላል።
We can
ያን መከወን ደግሞ ብቃት ይፈልጋል።
we can do that,
ብቃት
but
ማለት ተቋማዊ ብቃት ነው።
undertaking it requires institutional
የኢትዮጵያ
capacity.
ቀንደኛ የፖለቲካ ችግር
The major political challenge we have as a country,
የገዢውም የሚፎካከሩን ፓርቲዎች
both on the
ወይም
side of the
የፖለቲካ ሰዎች
ruling
ዋነኛው ችግር
and the opposition
አንድን ነገር
and the
ከማድረጋችን በፊት
individuals, is before we do something,
ጥንቅቅ ያለ የኃይል አስተላለፍ ትንተና ማድረግ አለመቻል።
we don't have analysis of power.
አንድ መንግስት አንድ ፓርቲ
one government, one party,
ማንኛውም ስራዎች ውስጥ
in all its
አሸናፊ ሆኖ
activities
እንዲወጣ የሚያደርገው
can only be
በቂ
a
የሆነ
winner
በእውቀት ላይ የተመሰረተ
when it have
በእውነተኛ
sufficient
ዳታ
knowledge-based,
ግብዓትነት ላይ
data-based
የኃይል አሰላለፍ ትንተና ያስፈልጋል።
power
በውስጥ ያለው
analysis.
ኃይል ምን ይመስላል?
What's the
በውጭ
power
ያለው
within the
ኃይል ምን
inside
ይመስላል?
and in
ይህ
the
ኃይል ውስጥ
outside.
ግጭት ቢፈጠር
And if there are
ምን አይነት
conflicts,
ሽንፈት ምን አይነት ድል ሊያጋጥም
what are the
ይችላል
wins
ብሎ
and losses?
መተንተን በእጅጉ
And these
ያስፈልጋል።
require analysis.
የኃይል አስተላለፍ ትንተና ስለማይሰራ
Since
ሰው
we don't do
ይነሳና
that,
በሶስት ወር መንግስት ሆናለሁ ይላል።
a person will just rise up and say, I'll be a government.
ጠላትን በትክክል
In order to be a government, you need to understand your enemies. You need to understand yourself and the capabilities of your enemy, identifying your capacity and how you can wear down your enemy.
ዝም ብሎ ሰብሰብ ብሎ ፓርቲ ነን
You cannot just assemble and become a party in just 6 months and say you'll win.
ለዚህ ነው
It's
ባለፉት
just
40
a wish.
ዓመታት ብዙ ፓርቲዎች
That's
ኢትዮጵያ
why
ውስጥ
in the past
እየተፈጠሩ
40 years
ማሸነፍ
we've
ያልቻሉ።
had political parties that never succeeded, that never made it
የኃይል
to power.
አስተላለፍ ትንተና
So
በደንብ
the
ካልተሰራ
power
በስተቀር
ranking
ምንም
analysis
የምንመኘው እንጂ
requires
የምናረጋግጠው የምንጨብጠው
deep
አይሆንም።
analysis. It will
ከዚህ
just be a
በተጨማሪ
wish otherwise.
የሁኔታ ትንተና ያስፈልጋል።
Moreover,
ምንድን ነው ያለው
we
ሁኔታ?
need to also have
መንግስት
situational
የሚባለው
analysis.
አካል ምን ይመስላል?
The institution called government, what does it look
ተቃዋሚ
like?
የሚባለው አካል ምን ይመስላል?
What does oppositions look like as an institution?
አካባቢ ሀገራት ምን ይመስላሉ? እዚህ
What
ውስጥ
do the
ምን
neighboring
አይነት
countries
ኦፕሬሽን
look like?
ብናካሄድ ስኬታማ
What kind
መሆን
of
እንችላለን
operations will
ተብሎ
be successful?
የሁኔታ ትንተና ይሰራል።
We need to have such kind of
እነዚህን
situational,
ጉዳይ
situational
በዝርዝር የተገነዘበ
analysis.
ሰው እርምጃ
A person who
ወደ
understands
የሚል
it
ጥያቄ አያነሳም።
and that way will never ask the question that the
Ayanasa.
actions
ለምን
are
ያላችሁ
delayed.
እንደሆነ
Why?
እኔ በግሌ
As an individual,
እንኳን ሀገሬን እንኳን የሰጣችሁኝን ኃላፊነት
let alone my
ልወጣ
country,
ይቅርና
let alone the responsibility you
ራሴንና
give me,
ቤተሰቤን መከላከል
I
የማልችልበት
am
ፖዚሽን ላይ ነው።
I was in a position where I was unable to
ለምሳሌ
protect myself and my family.
እናንተ ጠቅላይ ሚኒስትር ሆነ በህገ መንግስቱ መሰረት ሀገር አገልግል ብላችሁ የሾማችሁኝ ቀን
When the day you made me the
የደህንነት
prime
ስሙ
minister
ከኔ ጋር
to make
የነበሩ
me serve the country,
ሶስት
the
ግለሰቦች
Ministry of Intelligence and
በጥበቃ
3
ስራ
other
ላይ የነበሩ
people,
ሶስት ግለሰቦች ይዘህ ቤተ መንግስት መግባት አትችልም ተባለ።
were denied
እኔ
access
የግል ጥበቃዎች ላይ ማዘዝ የማልችል ሰውዬ ነው እናንተ
to
ለምን
the
ሀገር
palace.
አትጠብቅም እያላችሁ ጥያቄ የምታቀርቡ?
and I said, if you say these
አትችልም።
people are not fit, why
እኛ
do you even
የሰጠንህ
trust me?
ጠባቂ ብቻ የሚጠብቅህ ተብሎ
They said it's
ጠባቂዎቼ
only
እንዳይገቡ
the
ተከለከሉ።
protection
ይሄ
we
ጠቅላይ
give you
ሚኒስትርን
that
ቁጥጥር
has to prevail.
ቢሮ የምሰራበት
The office I work in
ቢሮ ቁልፍ ያለው በእነዚህ የደህንነት ጠባቂዎች ነው።
is in the hands of this
ከፍተው
intelligence
የሚያስገቡኝ
security.
አስወጥቶ የሚቆልፉብኝ እነሱ ናቸው።
They open and close the door whenever I walk in and out.
ካሜራ ቢኖር መቅረጫ ቢኖር ማንኛውም
I was
ጉዳይ
even
ቢኖር
unaware if there
በሌሎች
was
ሀገራት
surveillance
እንደተለመደው
camera recording in my room.
ካውንተር ሰርቪላንስ አሰብቼ አጸድቼ ስራ ልሰራ
I
አልችልም። ምክንያቱም
was
ጠዋት ጠዋት
unable
ሳልገባ
to do a counter
ገብተው
surveillance
አስተካክለው
to check
በፈለጉ
my
ሰዓት መጥተው
office.
ነው ግባ የሚሉኝ።
They will just open the door in the morning, allow me to go in the office and go out. I was unable to discuss using my phone. I couldn't call Mr. Damaka for a discussion and so on. My office was
የምጠበቀው ብቻ
controlled.
ሳይሆን ቢሮዬም በሰዎች እጅ ነው።
Moreover, my office in general was under the control of other.
የቤቴ ዋናው ቁልፍ
forces.
በእነዚህ ኃይሎች ነው።
Even
አስገብተው
the key to
የሚቆልፉብኝ
my
እነሱ
house
ናቸው። ጠዋት
was controlled by
ከፍተው
these
የሚያስወጡኝ
people.
እነሱ ናቸው።
They opened the door and closed the door.
እዚህ
morning
ውስጥ
and
ነው
night.
እናንተ ሀገር እርምጃ አልወሰደም አልተከላከለም።
This is the
የሚል
scenario
ጥያቄ
I was
ብትጀምሩ
in
ማለት
when
ነው።
you said, why did he not
የእናንተን
take
ደህንነት
actions?
ሳይሆን የራሴና
So
የልጆቼን
I
ደህንነት
was
ማረጋገጥ የምችልበት
unable to
ፖዚሽን ላይ
safeguard the safety of my family, let
በዚህ ግን
alone.
አያበቃም። ወታደር
you.
ስለነበርኩኝ እስቲ አንድ ስቴፕ
It didn't stop there.
በውጭ ለማምለጥ እንኳን
I was
የምችልበት
member of
መንገድ
an
ካለ
army,
ግቢውን
so I started thinking if
ለማየት
there were
ፈልጌ
ways where I
በአካባቢ
can
ያሉ ሰዎች
escape.
ቢሮዬና
I
ቤቴ
started
በእጄ
looking
ማውጣት
around
ለማወቅ
the
ያለው
compound.
ግቢዬን ለማወቅ ግቢ እንመልከት ስላቸው ይሄ እኮ
And I
አልተለመደ
asked if
ማለት
I can look around the
ነው።
compound. They
ግቢ
said
ማየት
this is
ማለት
not
አልተለመደም።
usual for the prime minister
ከቢሮ ቤት ብቻ ነው።
to
አርብ
look around the compound.
ካስገባን
They
ሰኞ
said
መተን
you go
እስከምንወስድ
to the office
ቤት
and
መቀመጥ።
to
ቤት
your
ማለት
house.
ቤት ነው
And they
እንጂ
said
በረንዳም
when they
አይቻልም።
said your house, it meant inside the house, not even
አይ
in
እኔ እንደዛ አይነት
in
ጠቅላይ ሚኒስትር አይደለሁም። አካባቢ
in the premise.
ቸገራለሁ ብዬ
I
በግል
said, I'm
ግቢ
not
ወጣሁ።
only a prime minister, I need
ማለት
to look
ከቤቴ
around
ውጭ ያለውን
my
ግቢ ለማየት።
compound. I need to see what's
ይህ
outside.
ግቢ የታወቀ ክፍለ ከተማ የለውም።
This compound
የታወቀ
never
ቀበሌ የለውም።
had
ግን ደንበኛ መንደር
identified
አለ።
sub-city Kabale,
በየአጥሩ ስር ላስቲክ አለ፣ ደሳሳ ጎጆ አለ፣
but there were
የጭቃ ቤት አለ፣
plastics,
ትልልቅ ሰዎች
small
አሉ፣
houses
ህጻናት
around
አሉ፣
it,
ሴቶች አሉ።
elderly children,
መንደሩ
and those type of
ቤተመንግስት
people
ይሁን ህንጻ
around it. So it was not clear whether this was a palace or just a random house.
እነዚህ ሰዎች
It was
የስራ
surrounded by
ድርሻቸው
normal
ምንድን ነው?
people, and I started asking, what are the roles of these people? What are they doing here? It was never clear.
በየቦታው ሽንት ቤት አለ፣
There
በየቦታው
were
ጎጆ ቤት
toilets
አለ፣ ላስቲክ
everywhere,
ቤት
there
አለ፣
were
ልክ የጎዳና
cottages
የሚመስል
everywhere
አጥር
in the
ተንተርሰው
compound,
የተሰሩ የላስቲክ
as if it
ደሳሳ
was
ቤቶች አሉ፣
on the street.
ሰው ያለባቸው።
No one lives in those houses.
ስለዚህ ቢሮና ቤት ብቻ ሳይሆን ግቢ
So it
ሮጦ
wasn't
ለማምለጥ
a
በፍጹም
house
አይቻልም።
and office,
በአደገኛ ሁኔታ ውስጥ
but I was also under a very dangerous situation.
ተገነዘቡ።
And that's what I
አንድ ስቴፕ
understood.
ግቢ ውጭ ልመልከት ብዬ ሳይ
So I had to
በዚህ በኩል
look
ጥይት ቤት የሚባል
outside.
በመቶዎች የሚቆጠሩ ሰዎች ያሉበት፣
There was
በዚህ
a
በኩል
place
ፓርላማ፣
where they stored
በጣም
ammunitions on the one side, on the
በዚህ
other
በኩል
there were
ጋራጅ፣
protections, on the
የቤተ
other
መንግስት
side
ጋራጅ
there
ተብሎ
was
በጣም በርካታ ሰዎች
a
ያሉበት፣
garage
ዝቅ
that
ዝቅ
has
ብሎ
a lot of
የብሔራዊ
people,
ደህንነት
and
ከህግ ውጭ
down there were a
ከአዋጅ ውጭ
national
ስፔሻል
intelligence
ወታደሮች
office
አሉ።
outside of
Special
the
force
law,
ያላቸው
the
ወታደሮች አሉ።
constitution that has special forces.
ስለዚህ ከቢሮና ከቤት ቢመለጥ ከግቢ
If I
አይቻልም፣ ከግቢ
skip
ቢመለጥ
my
ዙሪያውን
office and my
እንዳልኳችሁ ነው።
house, I can skip the
ባጭሩ
compound.
ዘመናዊ
Even the
እስር ቤት
compound
ውስጥ
is very difficult
ያለ
to leave.
ጠቅላይ ሚኒስትር መሆኔ
So the
ያወቅኩት።
prime minister was basically stranded.
ከዚህ እስር ቤት ራሴን ነፃ ለማውጣትና
In
ሀገርና
order to
ኢትዮጵያ
free
ኃላፊነት
myself
ለመወጣት
from
በተለይ
this
የተከበረው ምክር
cage,
ቤት
honorable
የሚጠብቃቸው
House,
ሪፎርሞች
in order
ለማሳካት
to fulfill
የመጀመሪያው
the
ስራ
reforms you are
ከቤተሰብ ጋር
requesting,
መመካከር ነበር። ቤተሰብ
the
ከዛ
first
በፊት
discussion need to
በስደት
be
ስለነበሩ
made with my family.
ያለው ሁኔታ ካየን በኋላ ይሄ ቤት እስር ቤት ነው፣
And we said, well,
እዚህ ተቀምጠን በቲቪ የወጣን ጠቅላይ ሚኒስትር
this
መሆን
is
አንችልም፣
prison.
ስራ ይፈልጋል፣
We
ሪስክ
can't go
አለውና
out of here and
ወደ
rule a
መጣችሁበት
country.
ተመለሱ በሚል ተስማምተን ቤተሰብ
So
ወደ
we
መጣበት መልሰን
decided and
በየቀኑ
sent family back home.
መታፈንም መታገትም መገደልም ሊያጋጥም እንደሚችል በማሰብ
And
ነው
considering that there would be
የመጀመሪያው
killings,
ወር በስፖርት
suppressions, or anything, we
እንደ
started
ጠቅላይ
the
ሚኒስትር
first
ሳይሆን በእስር ቤት ያለ
activities.
አንድ
Not as a prime
ነገር
minister,
ግን ወጥቶ
but
በሚዲያ
as an
መታየት የሚችል
individual
ሰው።
in prison, but who can appear in public on the
ይሄን
media.
ኃይል ይሄንን መንግስት ወይም በዚህ ሰው የሚመራው መንግስት ነው ለውጥ አታመጣም ወይ የሚል ጥያቄ የሚነሳ
You're asking this
ከዚያ
person
በኋላ ከጓደኞቻችን ጋር የነበረው
to
ምክክር
create a
በተለይ
reform.
ከምክትል ጠቅላይ ሚኒስትሩ ጋር
And our comrade,
ህዝቡ
including
ይሄን ይፈልጋል።
the deputy prime
እኛ
minister,
ያለንበት ሁኔታ
we started
ይህን
analyzing our situation.
ሀሳቦች ማሰብ መጻፍ እንችላለን።
We said we can write and raise ideas,
ለሚባለው ብናወያይ
but if we
ሀሳባችንን የሚያሳካ
start discussions with others, it will only reverse our ideas and actions. And we said, how can we make the change or reform people are asking for?
ሳንዱች አፕሮች እንከተል።
And we said, let's follow a sandwich approach.
ምናምኑን ለጊዜው እንተወውና ከላይ ሀሳብ እንለይ።
Let's do away with the conventional assembly council,
አመራር በዚህ
and we said the central administration should follow this approach, and we should communicate with the public and try to understand what they want.
እኔ በጣም ፈጣን ነገር ነው የምነግራችሁ በየቀኑ የሚደረግ
I'm
ነገር።
expediting
በዚሁ አግባብ
the story.
ህዝባችን ጋር እንገናኝ፣ ህዝቡን
We
እናድምጥ፣
said,
ለህዝብ
let's
ሀሳባችንን
communicate with the
እንስጥ።
people, let's sell our ideas to the people,
ወታደራችን ይሁን፣
and
ጠባቂያችን ይሁን፣
let's make
ህዝቡ
the
ለውጥ
public the
እንዳይቀለበስ
guardian,
የሚቆም ይሁን።
and let's make sure the people will stand
ወደ ህዝብ እየወጣን
on the side of the
ሀሳቦቻችንን
reform,
ለህዝብ እናካፍላለን።
and let's also share our ideas.
ይህም ብለን
After
የመጀመሪያው
saying that,
ጉዞ ወደ ሶማሌ ክልል ነው የወሰንነው።
we made the first trip to Somali
ወደ
region.
ሶማሌ ክልል የወሰንበት ምክንያት
The
አሁን
reason
ያያችሁት
is because the current
መጀመሪያ
danger
የተዘጋጀው በሶማሌ ክልል ነው።
was first
የሰለጠነ
designed
ከ10,000
in
በላይ
Somalia.
የታጠቀ
More than
ልዩ ኃይል
30,000
ተደራጅቶ
trained,
ኃይል
armed
ተቀናጅቶ
special forces
ኢትዮጵያን
existed in that
የማፈራረስ
region
ህልሙ
with the
የመጀመሪያው
idea to
ታርጌት
dismantle
በዚያ
the
ክልል
country.
ከዚያ በተጨማሪ
Moreover,
ከለውጡ በፊት አንድ ሁለት ወር ውስጥ በጣም መፈናቀል
there were several displacements and killings
ያንን
before
ማከም
that, a
ይፈልጋሉ።
month before that.
ሶማሌ ክልል ለመሄድ
So we said
ስንነሳ
we need to
የደህንነት
heal
ሹሙ
that. When we asked to go to Somali region, the intelligence head said, you can't
ሶማሌ
go.
ክልል መሄድ አትችልም
You
አለኝ።
can't
ለምን የሚል
go
ጥያቄ
to
ተነሳ።
Somali region. And I said, why? He said,
ሊገል ስለሆነ
Al-Shabaab
ሶማሌ ክልል አትሄድም፣
is designing to kill you,
መሄድ አትችልም።
so you cannot go to Somali region.
አንደኛ እንዳጋጣሚ
First of
ሆኖ
all,
መረጃ እንዴት ፋብሪኬት እንደሚደረግ በትንሹም ቢሆን ልምድ
I have
ስለነበረኝ፣
experience on how
ሁለተኛ የመረጃ ተቋማት ስራ
information is fabricated,
ለውሳኔ
and
ሰጪ
also
አካል ውሳኔ የሚደግፉ መረጃ ማቅረብ እንጂ መወሰን አልነበረም።
this intelligence
የትኛው
only
ከውሳኔ
had
ጀምሮ
the
አካሄድ
responsibility
ጀምሮ
of giving me information that helps me make
እንደዚህ
decisions,
ጉዳይ
not
አካሄድ
make
ሊወስንና
decisions for me.
ለምን ስል ነው
And whenever I asked why,
አልሸባብ ሊገልህ
he
ነው።
said the justification is
እና
Al-Shabaab
መልሴ
will
የነበረው
kill you.
ሁለት ነገር ነው።
And my
አንደኛው
response were two. One,
ለውሳኔ የሚያበቃ መረጃ አምጣ።
please give me
ሁለተኛ ዋናውን
information
ነገር
that helps
ሰርተኸዋል።
making decision. And
ዋናው
two, you
ሊገልህ
did the
የሚፈልግ
major
አካል መኖሩን ማወቅ
task.
ነው።
Your task is to identify there is a group that wants to kill me. So I said, protect me from these killers and let me do my job. Had you not known about it, it would have made my life very difficult. That now you know it, so protect me and I will do my job. Then I went to Somalia region. We've had great time, we've discussed with the people. Coming back from Somalia region, the second trip was to Makale. The people of Tigray at the time, given the condition, were affected like any other member of the people. So we approached the people and to alleviate any danger, we started discussing with their language. So we went to Makale, Tigray region, sorry. I was never told there is a special force. I went there, we've had a discussion, and the power of the junta was surprised, shocked.
ነገር ተፈጠረ። የትግራይ ህዝብን በነበረው
The people of Tigray
ከፍተኛ አቀባበል አደረገ። ወጣቱ
received us very well, and the youths were in need of reform, so they
እና
supported.
የሳንዱቹ ሀሳብ ገና ገባቸው ከመቀሌ
That's
በኋላ።
when they understood the approach, the sandwich approach.
በዚህ ከቀጠለ
And after Makale, they said, we need to stop this. If it continues like this,
አደገኛ ነገር ይፈጠራል።
they will isolate the people and it will be very dangerous.
ውይይት አደረጉ።
They have
ቀጥሎ
had their
ጉዞ
own
አምቦ
discussions.
ነበር የሚሄደው።
My
አምቦ
next
ላይ
trip was to Ambo.
ብሎ አትሄድም ኦነግ ይገልሃል ተባለ።
It was said I can't go to Ambo
የጠቅላይ
because
ሚኒስትር ከመሆኔ ከአንድ ወር
Oneg
በፊት አምቦ
will
ሄጄ
kill me,
የማድረው በታች
OLF will kill me.
እንደምናሸንፍ ለማሸነፍ እንደምንታገል እና
A month
ማድረግ
before
እንዳለበት
that,
ያወያየሁት ቦታ ነው።
I was there to discuss with the people that we're going to win, that we're going to change, we're going to have a reform.
የተባልኩት
And they said,
ከዚያ
there is a
ገባኝ።
force that will kill you, so don't go to
የሚገለኝ
OLF.
አልሸባብ ሳይሆን
I understood then.
የሚገለኝ
I said,
ጉያ ያለ
it's not
ኃይል
OLF
ገባኝ።
or Al-Shabaab that will kill me. I
በሌሎች
said,
ኃይሎች
it's the group
ተጨማሪ
within
ጥረት
that will
ጥበቃ
kill me.
እንዲደረግ አድርገን አምቦ ሄድን።
So we added additional forces and went to Ambo
ከአምቦ
security.
ስንመለስ
We've had fruitful
ወደ
time
ባህር
in
ዳርና
Ambo,
ጎንደር
and then we went to,
ስንይዝ
we decided to go to
የወልቃይት ኮሚቴ
Gondar
የሚባሉ
and
ያኔ ከቅማንት
Bahar
ጋር
Dar.
ታስታውሱ ከሆነ ችግሮች
There
ነበሩ።
was a Welkite committee, there were
ሊገሉ እቅድ
problems at the
ይዘዋል።
time,
እቅዱ
and they
በእጃችን ላይ
said
ስላለ
they plan to kill you, we have their plan, and they said you can't go.
የአማራ ክልል አመራሮች
Amara
እዚያ ያለውን
region
ስራ እንዲሰሩ አድርገን
administration were told to do the underlying activities, and we went.
ፋውል ረገጥን። መሄድና ህዝብ ማናገር ሳይሆን
It wasn't only talking to people, the Welkite committee and
ቅማንት ኮሚቴ የሚባለው
the Command committee, we sat them on a table and
ስንወያይ
have had discussions, and from the discussion
መካከል ያለው ልዩነት ከምትጠብቁት በተካረረ አለመነጋገር
our
ስልክ
disagreement
አለመደዋወል
between
ጀመረ።
us
የወልቃይት ኮሚቴን
and the
የሚያናግር
intelligence
ሰው
grew,
እኛ ጋር መነጋገር የለበትም የሚል
and they
አንተ
said
ያለ
if you're having discussions with Welkite, you will not be having
ከዚህ
discussions
በኋላ
with us.
በሰሜንም
Following that, in the north, in the
በምዕራብ
east,
አዲስ አበባ አካባቢ
west,
በተወሰነ
and
ደረጃ
also to
ስላነጋገርን
some
የህዝቡን
extent we've
ስሜት
had
ስላወቅን
discussions in
ቀጠል
Addis
በቀጠል
Ababa
ያለ
as well.
ውሳኔ
So we started
በመወሰን
taking expedited
ህዝቡ ከለውጡ
decisions and
የሚጠብቀውን ነገር
actions.
እያሳየን መሄድ
We
አለብን።
started showing the people what they wanted to see.
እንደምታስታውሱት በየቀኑ
As you may remember, we were giving
እንደዚህ ሆነ እንደዚህ ሆነ
emergency news,
ውሳኔዎች መወሰን ጀመሩ።
breaking news saying we have released someone, we have done this and that.
ሁለት ሶስት ቦታ ቻሌንጅ ገጠመን። አንደኛው በዚያው ሰሞን የተፈቱ
One is
የፖለቲከኛ እስረኞች
political prisoners that were then released. After they were released,
አዲስ አበባ ላይ እንደ ስብሰባ ነገር አድርገው
they conducted a meeting in
ኮከብ
Addis
የሌለውን
Ababa,
ባንዲራ
and they
ይዛችኋል
held the
ተብለው
flag
ተመልሰው
without
ቤት
the
ሳምንት
the
አልሞላቸውም
star.
ተፈቱ።
They were thrown back to jail
ተፈተው
again, not even a week in freedom, they were thrown back to prison, and I said, no, you should let them go. It's not right. If we arrest people for taking a flag without a star, there was a lot of controversy, but they were freed. And then concerning Ato Andarkacho Tsege, there was a request for his release. It was again very hot controversy involved. He said he's a dangerous person. He's facing trial, death penalty. There was a very strong resistance. Up until this moment, nobody knows who's the prime minister. The prime minister issues an order, somebody throws it away. So we involved the Attorney General's office in this matter. So we made sure that Andargacho Tsege was released, and when that was done, the situation got worse. It's either you or us. Very hard controversy and conflict, actually. So I said we cannot continue like this. So leaders of security, governments with their own army, media, we cannot continue together. I decided that they need to be removed. So we decided to study the situation. Should we take measures on the defense force only, or on the security apparatus only? If we do that on these two entities, how dangerous would it be? When we studied the situation in some countries, the security head and our army head were removed, and there was a lot of destruction in some African countries. We had to learn from history and devise a way to avert destruction. And so when we were forced to do is to remove governments under a government, and that the institutions should remain at an institutional level. What I want to make clear here is at the moment, General Samora, the army commander-in-chief, had done his level best to avert the coup d'etat. Even after the change, he was very supportive and had a spirit of support. It's very clear, something we cannot deny. Though he was in support, we had to change the situation, so we had to honorably lead him to retirement. So we removed the commander-in-chief and also the security head. The response was different. General Samora's response was much better. His spirit of cooperation was there, but the institution had to go through reform, so we had to take measure. After we took this action, the situation got worse and very clear. So the security head they stole various armaments and fled to Mekelle. What I want this parliament to understand is we don't even know what he took from that office. How much of the armament is stolen, we don't know, because the security entity had become a family entity and not really an organizational per se. What purchases have been done, where are the stored, nobody knows, no information whatsoever. When I was told that Al-Shabaab would kill, there were information sent to me, but I never open postal offices. I never do that because it could prove to be costly, dangerous. The institution cannot even report, the security apparatus cannot even report what its own head did. So lastly, as you know, during the parade in support in Addis. There was an attempt on my life when what that was done. The police, the defense force, and the security all were there. A very, very close attempt on my life that could have proven costly. It's also when we made that search, we find out that bombs, armaments were stolen from the security office. Even then, we didn't know the exact type of armaments, the number of armaments that were stolen. Armaments bought from Israel, silencing with silencing apparatus that could be used in assassinations. From that time onwards, this individual that used to be head of security office, we began conversing with the Tigran government, asking them at least he should return the armaments that he stole. And as you know, they have their own media, this individual, the Abiy media, using government funds, of course. And even in the palace, he has his own soldiers. If I want to travel outside, I don't know what can happen on the air. I cannot trust the airplane. So if I do not have a liberty for myself, what can I do? This must be clearly understood by the parliament. It was not something easy. Things that I have not mentioned yet. The reason why I'm disclosing it, that we all to know exactly what we went through, and everybody, including the Ethiopian people, have a right to know history. So we said, well, let's conduct SSR, Security Service Reform. So we started with INSA, Security Office, the police, the Defense Force, the financial intelligence were included, and the reform process. We attempted on that. When we did that, security apparatuses, they're not even existent. They are just family organizations, incapable. Family members are gathered up in there. So it had to be literally demolished and redone. When we look at the defense force, doing the same would be problematic. So we wanted to gather as much data as possible to have a closer understanding, and the results indicated that the defense force it was very difficult to change the defense force within even the coming 5 years. For instance, in the defense force, the 4-star full generals from Tigray region, they constitute 60%, and from the entire other nation, it's 40%. This is the 4-star generals. Going one step lower, major generals. That's lieutenant generals. The numbers is smaller. 50% of them were from Tigray region. One step lower, major generals. 45% from Tigray. Brigadier generals, 40% from one place. Colonels, 58% from one region. Lieutenant colonel, 66% from one region. One step lower, 53%. What does this mean? If I change the general, the colonel, and then the lower rank, so to bring a balanced army in the coming 10 years, it was quite impossible. From general to lower ranks, 55% are from Tigray region. Among the generals, okay, it could be because of experience, but lieutenant colonel, captain, 20 years is enough in an army career. In 20 years, he can become a captain, a colonel. There's no justification that would prevent that.
የተሰራው ስራ ግን አሁንም
So, but the work done, but even now, even 5 years, in 10 years, we could not think of a reform because potential leadership is expected to come out of a certain region. This would not benefit Tigray, it would not benefit Ethiopia.
ባለው የህዝብ ቁጥር ልክ
Tigray, as per the number of its population, must of necessity participate in defense forces, must protect its country, be it Tigray or Oromia or Amara or Benishangul, to get a bigger share would create the problem that we're facing now. It's not beneficial at all. So I just talked of high-ranking officials with ranks. When we look at other positions of authority, like in a defense headquarters, like divisions of people of leadership, 80% of them are from Tigray region. The first scenario was 55%. But those in position in offices, 80% of them, the staff in the headquarters, 80% from Tigray region. What does it mean? He knows what's the purchasing, training, communication, everything is controlled by people that come from one region. Let's go a bit lower level. From defense forces, there are other forces, divisions, you can say. The divisions that Ethiopia had, the leaders 100% were from Tigray, deputy leader from 100% from Tigray in all divisions. Not only this, like in the northern and east, it could be Amhara, like in logistics, but in the northern, the commander, deputy commander, logistics, administrator, all the 4 members of the committee are from Tigray. Why the north division? I would elaborate later. This is a division. Let's go even a step lower. Like subdivisions, mechanized and foot soldiers, 100% mechanized subdivisions, 100% are Tigrayans. Like the foot soldiers, 80% leaders are from Tigray region. So they don't actually lead, but just to count number of generals. We're going a step lower, mechanized brigades, 85% are from Tigray, foot soldiers, 80% from Tigray. Look at it from brigade up to the defense forces. It does not involve people from other regions. If we maybe say, let's look at the training department, in the 80% of it are Tigrayans. So if we bring in new people, because the trainers are from them, it could be problematic. So everybody needs to know of these facts, that this should not repeat in the future. True professionalism must be taken into account, because it's not a parliament. It's constituting from every ethnic group may not be a must, but our army must have a representative picture, and this is constitutional. The constitution makes it mandatory. We have to build an army that looks like the country. Let's now look at the entire army, the strategic policies, the directives, the training manuals. We gathered these and began to look at it. I don't need to be a general, and nobody needs to be a commander. The army was built. The red book, 100%, is against the constitution, blatantly. The book says you protect the party. If revolutionary democracy is touched, stand up and fight. So all this idea of democracy in election is a farce. If there is no federal, no revolutionary democracy, you cannot see the Ethiopia that you want to see. They say the foundation of Ethiopia is the ideology of the party. So it's only when that ideology and that party exists that Ethiopia exists. So even if even we have representatives from other ethnic backgrounds, it's quite useless because of the prevailing ideology. So the partisanship of the army, we found it to be very dangerous. I was very clear understanding, but trying to do something about it was something else. For instance, in Sidama region, when Olaitas were killed, the commander there is the general that assisted the destruction at the northern division, standing from the headquarters. Our Walaita in Sidamas do not kill each other. They have lived there for centuries. But it's the hierarchy, the apparatus. It has money, it has a mission, it incites violence, it creates killing of one another, and at the same time, it's that organ that is supposedly to enforce the law. In Ethiopia, the security apparatus in the past 2.5 years, the major perpetrators of violence, those that killed and destroyed property, there were 113 acts of incidents, violent incidents, 113, not including the recent ones. What does that mean? Every week there was preparation for war. The government was to cry, bury this, and then move on to the next burial service. It was purposely in an organized manner to stop any acts, any work of development. When all these transpired, when 113 conflicts transpired in almost all regions, but nothing happened in Tigray. They are not even ashamed of this. They say there's nothing going on in our region. Some external people, they say only peace exists only in Tigray region. It's true, but because the perpetrators are there themselves. So the wounds, they stir up wounds everywhere, created conflicts between people. It involved finance, training, dispatches, and the media is also there. The media says they speak in advance. Oromo killed Amaras and this and that, both in ordinary medias and social media, and some gullible people believe that and involve in further bloodshed acts. So to create ethnic conflicts and religious conflicts, they have done their level best. Have they succeeded? People have died, but their purposes has not been successful. They have created havoc in property, killed innocent civilians. If you consider that success. But not only that, if a person is displeased and leaves the country to Kenya, he goes to Kenya, some goes to Uganda, somewhere else, believing that the host country would receive them. But one Gojame, if he says I would go to Ambo, they say if the Ambo people are my people, if I get hungry, they would feed me. If I get sick, they would take care of me. That's why they goes there.
ወገኔ ካላለ ሰው አይሄድም።
If they don't have the site
ወገኔ
trust,
ብሎ የሄደው
they would
ህዝብ
not go there in the first place.
አብሮ ስንት መከራ ያየ ህዝብ
So people
እርስ
that
በርስ
have gone
እንዲጠራጠር፣
there,
እንዳይተማመን፣
lived together for
የተጋባ፣
centuries,
የተዋለደ፣
lived
በስንት
together,
መከራ አብሮ ያለፈ
intermarried,
በዓይነ
have been
ቁራኛ
together
እንዲተያይ
here,
ተስፋ
up and down together. These evil forces
ይህን በትንሽ
incited
ዳታ ለማስደገፍ
conflicts and
ባለፉት ሁለት
fear
ዓመት
among these groups of people
ተኩል
in the past 2.5
Oromia
years
ውስጥ
in Oromia.
37 ግጭቶች
There were 37 conflicts
በሻሸመኔ
in Shashamane,
በጉሊሶ፣
Guliso,
በባሌ
Bale
ከሃይማኖት ጋር እያይዞ
was
በሐረርጌ፣
religious, and
በጉጂ፣
also Harage, Guji Walaga,
ጭናክሰን፣
Chenaksan,
ሌሎችም ቦታ
and also in other places.
በዚህ 37
In the past,
ግጭቶች
in
ውስጥ
these 37 conflicts,
የተጎዱ አማሮች፣ የተጎዱ ሌላ
those
ሌሎች
that suffered, Amharas and other ethnic groups are there.
በጣም በርካታ ኦሮሞዎች
There are many Oromos
ቤተሰባቸው ፈርሷል።
that the families were
Abat
dismantled,
moቷል፣
father
ሚስት
died,
ሞታለች።
mother died, wife died.
ይሄ ኃይል
So this force,
ኦሮሚያን የብጥብጥ ማዕከል
they're
እያደረገ
making Oromia a center of
ኦሮሞዎች
conflict and confusion
ከወንድሞቻቸው ጋር እንዲቃረኑ እያደረገ
and creating conflict
Islamic
between
Christians,
Oromo and
Christians,
other
Christians,
people
Christians,
groups and
Christians,
trying to
Good
bring
Oromo
religious
Oromo
conflict.
Oromo
But they claim that we fight for the sake of Oromos.
ዳታውን ስትመለከቱ
And
ብዙ
in
የኦሮሞ
37
እናት
conflicts, when you look at the data, many Oromo mama has been left without a husband or without
ኦሮሞ
a
ካለ
father.
ባህሉ፣ ካለ ማንነቱ
Oromo
አምነው ወደው አክብረውት አብረው ከሚኖሩ ጎረቤቶቹ ጋር እንዲባላ ተደርጓል።
has been made to fight against people that lived. This is a loss for Oromo, for Amara. It's a loss for the entire
የሚጠቀም ሰው
country.
ካለ ይሄ ኃይል
If anybody is to benefit from this is this evil force. In Amhara region, there had been 23 conflicts.
በቅማንት
In
በአጣዬ፣
Kamata, Ataye,
በኦሮሚያ ልዩ ዞን፣
Oromia
እንደገና
Special
ሞጣ
Force, and
ደግሞ
also in
ባይናል።
Mota, that was religious conflict.
በነገራችን ላይ
By the way,
በኋላ
I would
እመጣበታለሁ።
come back to it later.
እያንዳንዱ ክልል
At every
በውስጡ
region,
ካሉ ብሔሮች
with those ethnic groups within the country and also with regional
አልፎ አልፎም ከሚያጎራብጡ
states.
አገሮች ጋር እንዲባላ
And sometimes even with other countries, attempts have been made to create
Bamara
conflicts. Same in Amara,
ብዙ ሰዎች ሞተዋል።
many have died.
ለምሳሌ
For
ቅማንት
instance, in Kamant,
የወሰን
when you
እንደሆነ
look at it,
ሁላችሁም
as
እንደምትገነዘቡት
you might all know, in Amara region,
የጎንደር አካባቢ
around Gondar,
ከሁሉም ብሔሮች የመዋለድ
there is
ከሁሉም
this
ብሔሮች የመኖር
tradition of intermarriage,
ከፍተኛ ልምምድ
living
ያለው
together with
በርካታ ኤርትራውያን፣
ethnic groups. There are a lot of
ትግራዮች፣
Eritreans, Tigrayans, Oromos,
ቅማንቶች፣
Kamant.
ብዙ ህዝቦች የተጋቡበት
Many people have
የተዋለዱበት ሀገር
intermarried.
ነው፣ ከተማ ነው።
That's the city and the region, the area rather.
ቅማንትና አማራ ብሎ
Kamant and
መለየት
Amara,
በማያስችል ደረጃ
it's
እያንዳንዱ
hardly
ቤተሰብ
difficult,
የተጋባ
possible to
በአማራ ክልል ያሉ
differentiate them. And at
ቁጥራቸው
Amara leadership,
የማይናቅ
quite a number of them,
ልጆቻቸው ቅማንቶች
their
ናቸው።
wives are Kamants.
ልጆቻቸው
The children
በእናት
are
ቅማንትና
half Kamant and
ከአማራ የተወለዱ
half Amara.
አንድ ቤተሰብ
It's
ናቸው።
one
አንድ ቋንቋ፣
family,
አንድ ባህል፣
one
አንድ ወግ
language,
ያላቸው
one culture, one tradition.
አያውቁትም ይሄንን ግጭት።
They don't have any problem,
ግጭት
but this conflict
ስፖንሰር ተደርጎ
has been
በአማራ
sponsored
ክልል ሰላም እንዳይኖር ሰዎች
so that there will not be
እንዳይጋቡ፣
peace in
እንዲጋደሉ
Amhara.
በጣም
There will be
በርካታ
ethnic conflicts
ብዙዎች
within the
ተጎድተዋል።
region, and
ብዙ
many
ንጹሃን
have
ዜጎች
died
ተጎድተዋል።
and suffered destruction.
በቤኒሻንጉል
In Benishangul,
15 ግጭቶች ነበሩ።
there were 15 conflicts.
መተከል፣
Matakal,
አሶሳ አካባቢ
around
ከኦሮሚያም ከአማራም
Asosa, both from Amara and Oromia, there was lots of
Dangur.
displacements. Dangu,
ያው እንደምትሰሙት ነው።
as you all hear,
አርሶ አደር
the farmer,
ወደ ማሳ ወጥቶ
he goes
ተገደለ
to
የሚል ዜና
his land
መስማት
and is killed.
የተለመደ
It's
ሆኗል
become a
ባለፉት
common news.
አዲስ አበባ ላይ
In Addis Ababa,
14 ግጭቶች ነበሩ።
there were 14 conflicts.
ከግጭቶቹ ሁሉ የሚገርመኝ ግን
What surprises me from among the conflicts
አጫሉ ሁንዴሳ
is the killing of artist Achalu Hundessa.
የአጫሉ ሁንዴሳ ግድያ
The assassination of
10
Achalu
ገደማ ሰዎች
Hundessa.
በአጫሉ ካታጎሪ እንዲገደሉ የታሰቡ ነበሩ።
There were
ብልጽግና ውስጥ ያሉ
among
ኃላፊዎች
10
ከብልጽግና
people
ውጭ ያሉ ተቃዋሚ
assigned
ፓርቲ
already
ኃላፊዎች
for
እንደዚህ
assassinations
ስማቸው የሚታወቅ
from
ሰዎች በመግደል
Prosperity
ሽብር
Party,
ለማፋፋም
and renowned people
መጀመሪያ
were already
ኦሮሚያ
marked
አካባቢ የተወሰነ
for
መግደል፣
assassinations,
ከዛ
first from
ከአማራ
Oria
አካባቢ
region and then from Amhara
ኃላፊዎች መግደል፣
region's killing
ግጭቱ የኦሮሞና
authorities
የአማራ
to
ማስመሰል
make it look like there is a conflict between Amara and
ሰፊ ስራ
Oromo. A
ተሰርቷል።
lot of work had gone into
አጫሉን
that. We've lost
ሌሎቹ
Achalu.
እንዳይሳኩ በጣም ብዙ ብዙ ሙከራ ስራ ተሰርቷል።
and we were able to avert further assassinations. What surprises me about Hachalu is a couple of years ago there was an issue. Why did Hachalu Hundeessaa had a viewing on Oromo TV? We faced a lot of criticisms from them. They themselves now were the first ones to announce the Oromo liberation fighter Hachalu was assassinated. You know what transpired after that. In Gambela, there was 7 conflicts and the camps also, refugee camps, there was conflicts. And in the north, as you know, the case of Gedio, Kuraverda, Konso, Mizan Tepi, in other parts also, especially in Gedio, between Gedio and Guji, and at every measurement you can say it's one family, but they created conflict, hatred, animosity. In southern part, a lot of people have been damaged. Other ethnic people that came to their own people have been killed. In Jijiga, in Afar, in connection with Essa, was 3 conflicts. In Dredwa, there was 3. In Harare, there was 2. In Sidama, we had 2. I've mentioned it earlier. All these being done, there was not even a single incident in Tigray. In Shiraro, the Kunamas and the Tigrays never fight. But in Awasa, Walaita and Sidamans fight. In Europe, there are Arabs, they don't fight with Tigrayans. They should not do that. But in other parts of the country, in various regions, not only that, but region against region, regional state against regional state. For instance, in Amhara, his neighbors with Benshangul, there was clashes. With Oromia, there was clash. With Afar, there was clashes. In Tigray, there was no conflict there. Afar, borders with Oromia, there were conflicts. Borders with Somalia, there were conflicts. With Amara also, there were conflicts. But there was a border with Tigray, but there was no conflict. The incident in Afar would be worth noting here. There was a conflict between Afar and Somali. So the regions of the leaders of the 2 regions, we called them. So the president of Afar, Honorable Ato Abwan, he said something of great. He said, with Afar and Somali, we had conflicts all along. It's not something new. But the current one, do you think the conflict is actually between Afar and Somali? When I asked to elaborate, they said, in this conflict, women are dying. Afars and Somalis never kill women. This is something new, he said. And secondly, he said, Afar and Somali, they fight during the night, never fight during nights. They do it only night. But this involves fights during the night also. And thirdly, Afar and Somali, they blatantly, they speak and fight with no coverings and with no masks. But now the situation is different. So the defense forces, we gave instructions that federal police and the federal army should remove, and then we decided to send in a federal special force Republican. We gave them commands to shoot at any other force around. So we gave commands for all other forces to leave. After that, it was total quiet. Not a noise. We cannot remove the defense forces from everywhere where there's a presence of defense forces. And here something that's very sad, our situation with Sudan, as I repeatedly said. The Sudanese people have done a lot of good.
ሰዎች ሄደው
So
መከላከያ ማለት እኮ እኛ
some
ነን፣
people went to Sudan.
እኛ እንወጋህን፣ አሁን ነው ጊዜው መሬት የምትወስድበት፣
They said, you,
መግባት
now
ትችላለህ ብሎ
the door is
የቆሰቆሱት
open
እኛ ነው።
and you can fight. People say
የሱዳን
that from
መንግስት
here,
ግን እኔ
but
በኃይል
the government
ሳይሆን
of
በህግ
Sudan
መንገድ
said, I will not
ይገባኛል
use
የምለውን ነገር
force,
መልሰው ብሎ
force,
መረጃውን ሰጡት።
but I would go the legal way.
እዚህ የሚያጋጩን አለበቃ ሲል እዛም ተወጣ። ሶማሌ ክልል ብትሄዱ ሲሚላርሊ ይሄኛው መንግስት ሞቃዲሾ ይደግፋል እንትና አይደግፍም እያሉ ሶማሌዎች
supports
ከኛ ጋር
Mogadishu,
ማባላት
and so they were trying to make us
ሳውት ሱዳን ብትሄዱ
get in
ተመሳሳይ
fight with Somalia as well. The same happened
በሀገር
in
ውስጥ ያበቃ
South
ጉዳይ
Sudan
ነው።
also. It didn't end within the country.
ከዛ በኋላ
Following
የኮማንዶ
that,
ወታደሮች ቤተ
the army
መንግስት
of the
አጥቀው
commando
የመጡበትን ታስታውሳላችሁ።
were armed and came to the palace. You remember that time? Around 200 forces.
ከመጣበት ቤተ መንግስት እስከወረረበት ጊዜ ድረስ
From the
ምንም
time they
መረጃ
came
አልነበረም።
to the time they surrounded the palace, we'd never had
በተደበቀ መንገድ
information.
ሙከራ ማድረግ
So
ክልልና ክልል
causing
ማጋጨት
disputes between
በቂ
people
ስላልነበረ እዚሁ መጡ፣
was not enough, so they had to come here.
ግቢ ድረስ መጡ።
They came to the compound.
እሱም ከሸፈ።
That also was
ህገወጥ
futile.
የመሳሪያ ዝውውር፣ ህገወጥ የገንዘብ ዝውውር፣
Illegal movement of arms and money took
ይሄ
place
ማስፈራራት
widespread. And there's
ከህዝብ ከብሔር
orchestrations
ብልጽግና ውስጥ ገባ።
get out of religion, people, and ethnicity and entered into prosperity.
በህይወታቸው ተወራርደው ያመጡ ግለሰቦች ሳይቀሩ
And the people
አይ በቃ እነዚህ
who
ሰዎች አንችላቸውም፣
gave their life for the reform also said, let's get into an agreement with these people because we can't handle them. They said this reform will not be success, and said, let's agree with them. But I said, we can't agree with the devil
ካልሰራ በስተቀር
unless you identify them.
ውስጣችን ያለ ኃይልን
The power within us
ተፍረከረከ።
was dismantled.
አሁንም ብዙ ሀሳብ ውስጥ ገባ። ህዝቡ
The opposition got in a different opinion. The people attitude changed. Many fingers were pointed towards us, and they started saying, the previous government is good. You need a strong government.
ብለው ቅስቀሳ ጀመሩ በግልጽ።
They started campaigning that.
የትግራይ ህዝብ ደግሞ
The
ከሌሎች
people of
ህዝቦች ጋር
Tigray
እንዳይስማማ
was
እንዳይገናኝ
made not to
መከበር ስሜት አማራ ሊወጋህ ነው፣
get
ኤርትራ
closer
ሊወጋህ ነው፣
with
ትግራይ ሊወጋህ
its
ነው፣
neighbors. So they were saying the federal government, the Amara, and so on are going to
ልወረር ነው እያለ የሚያስብ አድርገው
kill you.
በከፍተኛ ደረጃ ሰሩበት።
They were playing with their minds.
ጠቅላላ የኢትዮጵያ ህዝብ
The
በቂ ተገማች
general Ethiopian people
እንዲቆይ ያደረጉት ወጥቶ መግባት
were suspicious. They were never trusted coming back home.
ለሀገር እንዲሆን
They were filled with fear.
በለውጥ
The
ቅስቀሳ
government
በየሳምንት በሚፈጠሩ አጀንዳዎች እንዲወጠር እንዲያዝ አደረጉ።
was surrounded with agendas
ለውጡ ምንም
aimed at reversing the reform.
ሰፊ ስራ ሰሩ።
They
ይሄ ሲሰራ
created multifaceted
በተለይ
activities.
እንደምታውቁት የ-
As I have said earlier, the security service reform, especially the army, was very important. If we change that,
ይቀጥላል።
of course, the conflicts here and there will continue.
አልመጣንም፣ ባለውን የገባ ነው እና ችግር ስለሆነ ሪፎርም ያስፈልጋል ብለን
And we said the reform is important to change this for once and for all. So, three-level change took place: higher level, middle level, and lower level. The higher level administration,
ጀነራል እስከ ሻለቃ
starting from the general to a
የነበረው
commander to a
55%
captain, around 55% was reduced to 26%.
ከዚህ ጦርነት በፊት 26%
Before this
ከፍተኛ አመራሮች
conflict, 26% of higher officials were from Tigray.
የትግራይ
The number was
ተወላጆች በመከላከያ
enormous,
በቂ ሼር
but
ማግኘት አለባቸው
there
የሚል
needed
ጽኑ
to
እውነት
be, or we had a feeling that
ጥያቄ
equal
ነበረ።
share should exist within the army. We said, let's reform it.
ትግራይ የሚባል
We were
መከላከያ
not
ኃይል
saying we
ሊገባው
don't need
አልነበረም።
Tigray in the army.
ያን 26 ካደረግን በኋላ
After making
ሁሉም
that
እዞች
26%,
የነበረውን 25 አደረግን። በተለይ
we reduced from the total to 25. What the people should understand is that until the time of the reform,
የመጨረሻው ጣራ ሜጀር ጀነራል
Major General was the highest rank for Southern people representatives.
ደቡብ አጠቃላይ 50 ምናምኑ ብሔር
Around 50% of the South got Lieutenant General,
ለምን
around 50% after the reform. Why? Because 25 from South, from Oromo, and from Amara. If something happens, we would open the room for all to be capable. So we made a room for that because we think there are people capable. It wasn't an issue of capacity. They have proved that during this time also. The mechanized division also required professionalism. So we have 50% Tigray right now from 100. It wasn't easy to simply change it. The troops subdivision from 80 to 40%, mechanized division from 80 to 44, the troops to 40%. We've managed to make it around 50%, staffs to 25%, and also training to 25%. This was the higher level readjustment. Amara, Tigray, South were also incorporated. Those people who were removed and also at a higher level, at a higher rank, were never retired before their time reached. Previously, about Adasa and Baja Dabale were Lieutenant General at the time, so they were removed previously. But we didn't make the same mistake. We retired only people who reached the age of retirement and said we have to stand firm to that position. The second readjustment was the middle level administration. The captains there was a lot of problem at the rank of captain. The general is a political assignment. A colonel can be a general in 6 months, in a year sometimes. But a captain, unless he makes extra activities, he will not become a general. If we remove them, of course it will be a problem for the country, because the country got into these problems because of the reforms we did in the army. When we make these reforms, the forces that come out of here have their own buildings in the city, and after retirement they started assembling their own army. So if we remove the middle administration, definitely they will go there and build their own army and make us vacant. So we said it will make us weak and make the other party strong. Since it's a carrier, if they leave here, they will go somewhere. So it needs years. The third is the lower level administration. In the past 1.5 years, 2 years, the trainings given by the government and discussions never took place in the army. The change in the strategy, making it the army of Ethiopia and to be governed by the constitution and by the people of Ethiopia, to not be the army of prosperity. If it becomes the army of the prosperity, it will be definitely a problem. They had questions of salary, uniform. We tried to fulfill those and prepare the lower level. It was impossible to complete it in 2 years. It needed time because it requires time. We were unable to leapfrog. The second problem is any discussions we're having within the council or anywhere would reach the junta, and the junta would start its own discussion. The authority was not as it was before. We couldn't assemble and discuss at night and decide in the morning. So it was fruitless. And therefore, if the livelihood of Ethiopia and its people is at stake.
ራሱ መከላከያን በሚመለከት በሶስት ከከፈልነው ሪፎርም ውጪ
After dividing the three administrations within the army, we had secret divisions also. The first one was the Republican Guard. The Republican Guard, as it stands today, completed its mission. We don't need it anymore. It can be member of the army.
ስፔሻል ፎርስ ማዘጋጀት አለብን።
We decided to have a special force to do a surgery, to do operations. So we trained highly qualified special forces. That was what we tried to do. If there comes a problem, they will be there to solve it. And two, it was the Air Force. We had to revitalize the Air Force. It required technology, and especially we needed drones and UAVs, and we did multifaceted activities in that regard. We didn't allow them to see the types and models. It was a secret reform. When the special force were showing activities, they were looking at them, but they don't know their capabilities. They know few information, but they don't understand the entire operation. Few days before the war, some people visited the army. Some of you asked, why are they showing us the army? We wanted to show them that the Air Force is as you know it. We didn't want them to know what we prepared for them. So when they saw the Air Force and the army, they said, there is no preparation, so we're okay. Regarding the drone, we heard several news. You can go and see it for yourself. We planned it for years. It's a capacity build for years. But regarding the drone, the junta power, it was not hidden from them. I didn't hide it from them. We will get into a modern fight. And I told them, we have this equipment, so don't get into a fight. But they did not believe me, because it was impossible for them to see it within their network. So they didn't accept it. But this power, this force, left Mekelle and assembling around Agara Salam. What I want them to hear is that last night around midnight, we've heard several problems in Abiyadi and Agara Salam. We have seen their activities live. We didn't attack them at night because on retreat they took their children and their wives with them. They took members of our troop as well. There were several disturbances within the people. We saw it, we didn't attack, and we came back. But this will not continue. The second one is related to civilians. What really surprises me is the Air Force and the Special Force in general, the Ministry of Defense, the Honorable House. One thing I want you to understand is that when a MiG goes to the other side, it will be the responsibility of the captain to control the navigation and for the execution. It wasn't like that. It's not like that with the drone. The drone, every direction, every target is inputted, and every target is signed and approved. The Honorable House can see that. Every missile launched is backed by a signature of an authority. 99% hit their target, 99% did not have collateral. When it was suspicious, we don't fire, especially at night, because we don't want to kill children. They're ours.
በስፔሻል ፎርሱና
Between the special force
ኤርፎርስ ላይ
and the Air Force, the capacity created
የሚያደርገው ስላልነበረ
was unassumed by the enemy.
ድሮንን የሚያስቡት ለቶክስ ብቻ ነው።
They assumed drone for firing, but we're using drones to surveil,
ቀንም ማታም
to monitor their activities. We're watching them day and night.
ከሲቪሊያን ዳሜጅ ጋር ተያይዞ
In relation to civilian damage, we made sure extra caution is taken. Under no circumstances in 3 weeks in Humara, in Dansha, Shirare, Adagara, Adwalala, Adnabid, Adalom, Shire, Sadatnaka, Aksum, Adwa, Adigrat, Zalambasa, Makale.
አንዲት ከተማ አንድ ሰው
Not even a single person was killed in these cities.
ብቃት ማሳየት አይችልም።
No country's army can show such a performance.
ጀግና ወታደር ነው ያለው።
Our army is disciplined and victorious.
መቀሌ ልታፈርሱ ነው፣ መቀሌ ልታረጉ ነው።
They said, you'll destroy Makale and so on.
እንዴት እናፈርሰዋለን?
Makale is ours. It was built with our own resources. We're not going to destroy it.
መቀሌ ኦፕሬሽን አንድ ሰው አደጋ አልደረሰበትም።
Not even a single person was affected, damaged by the operation in Makale.
ጥያቄዎች ይነሳሉ።
But there are questions raised. Why are you using special force? Why are you using Air Force? Why were you not working on the mechanized forces? People definitely ask. It's easy to ask, but doing it is difficult.
መስራት ያልቻልንበት
We couldn't use mechanized forces because it requires money.
አንድ ታንክ ስንት እንደሆነ ታውቃላችሁ?
Do you know how expensive a tank is?
ያን ሁሉ ሀብት አሁን ባለንበት ሁኔታ
We
መፈጸም
cannot invest that much resource
ነገር
at
ግን
this time.
ይሄ
However,
ሰርቆ ከመከላከያ ሰርቆ የሚጠቀምበት ሚሳኤል
the missile the junta is using, the one it stole from the army, the rockets,
እጥፍ ቁጥር የሀገር መከላከያ ሚኒስቴር አለው።
we have
ዛሬ ማጎብኘት ትችላላችሁ።
double, triple
ያ እጥፍ ቁጥር ካፓሲቲ
that amount, that capacity. But they don't know we have the same capacity
አንድም ሮኬት
because it has to do with
አንድ
intelligence.
ሮኬት
We didn't launch a single rocket to Tigray.
ማን ላይ ነው ሮኬት የምንተኩሰው? ሮኬት ማለት በኪሎሜትሮች
Why are we sending rockets to?
የሚወድቅ ነገር ነው።
It's something that travels in kilometers and falls somewhere. We don't even know who it's going to affect. Our pilots,
ሲቪሊያን አሉ ካሉ ከነ ቦምባቸው
if they see civilians in the area, they come back without attacking. We decide after surveilling using our drones.
ሮኬት ግን
But rockets are very dangerous.
የተሻለ ቁጥር ቢኖረንም
Even though we have
እኛ ጁንታ አይደለም።
better capacity, we won't use it. We're not the junta. We have responsibilities. We conduct ourselves responsibly.
ሁለተኛው
So
ችግር
the problem with mechanized was money. The second problem is, and also what I want the people to understand in the house to also take into account, is that most of us fight on Facebook.
ባለፈው አንድ ዓመት
In the past year and a half,
እናድርግ ብለን
we wanted to open the army,
ሙከራ አድርገን ነበር። ሌላውን ክልል ተዉትና ከኦሮሚያና
let alone the other regions from Amara and Oromo, from these two big regions. It was difficult to even get 1,000 people. No one wants to be part of the army, but will question whether we are protecting the country or not. This only serves a purpose for Facebook.
ፍላጎት አልነበረም።
There was no need to be recruited. There was no desire to be part.
ሙሉ የሆነ ወጣት ወታደር መሆን ሙሉ ሰው ያደርገዋል።
If a youth becomes
18 ዓመት የሞላቸው ሰዎች
part of the army, it will make him
ግዳጅ ፈጽመው
a full person.
ወደ ስራ
In many countries, people serve before they join the labor force.
የሚመለመል ሰው
When you recruit someone to the army, out of 100 million people, it was difficult to find 5,000 people. The people of Ethiopia should think about this. It's very dangerous.
10 ቀን ምግብና መጠጥ ሲከለክሉት
Member of the army means a person who says, I'll serve my country even if you deny him food for 5 days.
ወታደር ማለት ሳይከፈለው
An army
ሚስት ማግባት
means
የሚያስችል ህይወት ሳይኖረው
a person who doesn't have a house
ያነሰ ደሞዝ እየበላ
to run his family, who gives his life for his country.
ዝግጅቱ አናሳ ነበር። አሁን ማወቅ አለበት።
The preparedness of the people, the Ethiopian people, was very, very low in terms of that. you need to take this into consideration. We can only succeed if you agree to participate. That's the only way we can protect our country. The other one is the diaspora. The diaspora, as you know, they love their country. When something happens, they'll be pissed. They go out on campaigns. But the diaspora were also supporting the junta in finance. Several times we said this power or this force was getting more foreign currency more than the government. They were giving weapons with which their brothers were killed. We know that when money comes into the country in an illegal means, there are benefits, there are profits, but it might kill your brother, your own brother. We can make it legal and we can find ways of adjusting, but it should not be used for the enemies, for illegal groups, so it kills our citizen. So we have to watch ourselves in that regard. Notwithstanding this, the SSR reform, the security service reform, however developed it is, unless we do reform in other sectors, we will not have a comprehensive peace in the country. The first one is political reform. Setting aside the army and the politics, if EPRDF fails, there was a notion, a negative notion that Ethiopia will be dismantled. A country that was formed a year ago cannot be trusted to carry the country, all in all. That was the assumption within the party. There is no country if we don't exist. In relation to that, when we enter into a party reform, when people say TPLF left when prosperity was created, that's wrong. When we went to Awasa, TPLF Central Committee have had a discussion and said we'll not go to Awasa and take part in the discussion. We knew there was that cult. We have had the information. Some of them that made it to the meeting said, we'll get information, we'll cause disturbance within them, and said it's better to dismantle them than not to go. So they joined us in Awasa. The APRDF council in Awasa was full of debates. Some of them were saying, let's accept Algiers agreement, let's give the land to Eritrea. And the decision was made unanimously, including their members. The head of the intelligence also was voting for that. It was also deliberated here in the House, but after making the decision, he made sure it's not executed. There were three fronts. The first front, when we started the meeting, there were groups that were insulting, making it more of a debate. They were assigned for that strategic purpose. And the second ones were that opposed them and acted like they were supporting. And the third group were trying to mediate. This was designed, they deliberated on it, and they assigned people for that activity also. That party that was raising hand and supporting us would leave the room and then say something different on the media. And the people insulting within the discussion, you'll not see them outside in public. This is an old strategy. They were using this in the past as well. We knew about it, so it didn't affect us as much. But the assemblies, the discussions were made, were affected by these activities. There were trying to disclose the discussions of the party, opposing activities, hiding criminals. When we said let's have institutional capacity for Ethiopia, they were saying how is Afar and Somali having equal voices the same as ours. They were raising this type of ideas. The politics of Ethiopia in terms of the ruling party, their loss for them was the establishment of prosperity. It was a victory. Perhaps they said prosperity is unitary and so on. It's not a unitary government. Prosperity stands for federalism. Prosperity believes that all nations and nationalities are respected for their language and ethnicity. It doesn't discriminate between groups. It doesn't discriminate against languages. This is not what we fought for. This is why we want to create institutions whereby all people take part. These forces said, how is a terrorist group coming into the country? They kept saying that for a while, but later they created a federalist group with a terrorist. When we said, let's have them come to the country, they debated. But later they became friends and tried to create a federalist group. This reform in the party and the activities of the TPLF junta came from Kuomintang, when the China Liberation Party, when they were bringing freedom to the country, they created Taiwan. They've had economy, power. Kuomintang had one advantage. Taiwan had a cost. All members, including the parliament, went there. And I told them, secession is not good for you. It will not benefit you. You can only benefit when you align with Ethiopia. Don't even think about it. The experiences of ABC were disastrous. And they said, like Kuomintang, the old ideology, and they tried to operate in a political way, taking that into consideration. The economy was slowed down. There was microeconomic imbalance, unemployment. Our projects, small or large ones, they were halted because of corruption. We were having difficulty paying salaries and loans outside of the problems I mentioned to you earlier. Without having these reforms, whatever we do for the army, it will be disintegrated. So the economy required a reform. So there were a lot of reforms in the economy. And the major problem we faced later on was changing our currency. When the time comes for that, the reform was coming to success, and the world was looking at Ethiopia in terms of the success in the economy. They were seeing that we're able to execute. I will not divulge into it for the sake of time, but government enterprises, the bank sectors, like the army, were surrounded for destruction, to extract resources. The format in the army and the intelligence existed in the telecom, in ELPA, sugar, and so on. I will not divulge into those, but the economic reform was very critical. The third critical area that needed reform was legal reform. Regarding the law, there were suppressing laws in the country that narrowed the political platform. that we opposed. We divided these into three. The first one was suppressing laws that narrowed the political reform, needed revisions. The CSO organization's proclamation needed to be loosened. Perhaps several NGOs were undertaking other activities outside of their mainstream job. We will solve those as we go, but it was one of the proclamations that needed to be changed. The second one is Electoral Board Revision Proclamation. It needed to stand out as an independent democratic institution, trusted and organized, so that it can perform its activities aligned with the constitution. But it was also suppressed by a proclamation, and we undertook the activities you know. The third one is electoral law. The party's rules and so on, and how we operate, the procedures. So there was a legal reform in that as well. The other one is Human Rights Commission. As you know, our cadres controlled it. After the reform, we strengthened the institution.
Increased, but comparatively, it's a liberal, free institution. The other one, submersive role, is the anti-terrorist law was very destructive, and we came up with improvement. The worst one is that of prison administration law. After a person is indicted, there were all sorts of beatings, dark rooms, unknown prison places who were against human rights, and that punishment cannot involve depriving food, depriving TV, that their human rights would be supported, and budget has been allotted to that, and also the media law that you know. Prior to the change, the website and blockers, more than 280 were blocked. The conventional media were being jumped. If that was not the case, dishes would be put in place, undestroyed dishes, but we changed that. Abuses, we can come up with improvements along the way, but we took care of this suppressive laws. And the cabinet was engaged in work from Monday to Friday. Meetings were held on Saturdays. This is something new. We wanted to take more time to work because there was a lot of accumulated things to take care of. Apart from these suppressive laws, there are other laws also, the trade law, mediation laws. We have signed the UN law, so we wanted to come up with a law that incorporated mediation, and this would be of great use in the economic arena also, and also to make Ethiopia conducive for international trade. They had their own positive contributions therein. And thirdly, great documents that stay there for 60 years, laws that were in place for 60 years, that came from the time of the king. Reform works has been done, criminal law, penal law procedure. It was there for 60 years. It's a big document. It has not been touched upon for 60 years, but that work has been done. The trade law, procedural laws, all sorts of laws have been gone through reforms, and also we had political reforms, economic reforms. and also law enforcement also underwent reforms. And the fifth critical area is diplomacy. When we come to diplomacy, we had two problems. One is Ethiopia is a country without a port. Secondly, the geopolitics. There are forces that want to weaken Ethiopia. They are still active and they were there in history. If we don't work in close contact with our neighbors, and that was proved if we had not made peace with Eritrea, you know what could have happened these days. Our reconciliation is a matter of individuals, but that of people. More than Eritrea government, the Eritrea people has demonstrated this clearly. I would come back to this later when we go to Somali. They said we don't trust you because it's you who create division. It's your government that's creating havoc. We hate you, they said. They say this blatantly, openly. When we go to South Sudan, they said it's you who created division and conflict in our eyes. They said you gave Suyu Musfan and created havoc and division between the two of us. It's you. Everybody hates Ethiopia as a neighbor. The parliament needs to know this. So this internal division has also gone abroad, be it ethnic and otherwise. So they harbored hatred against us, and to change these and to come up with a positive relationship with our neighbors' countries. And then we should give priority to the dignity of citizens. That's the way we went about it. The first issue was that of Eritrea. We decided together the decision was not from prosperity. It's the junta that decided this. They said, let's recognize the Algiers agreement. But to stop the reconciliation, there is nothing that they have not attempted. The decision was there, common decision. Sometimes they say it's individuals coming together and this and that, but now the junta has dehumanized the Ethiopian forces, sent them without clothes. The Eritrean people gave them clothes, they gave them food. The Ethiopian people must know and must honor this. The Eritrea people is not just a brother people, but a friend in difficult situation. When the operation was being carried on, the people we met in prisons, they are very in a bad situations. But those that fled Ethiopia to Eritrea, they get strong and came back to fight for their country. Those that denied it food and water are our own people. Those that were sent without any clothes, they were sent to Eritrea. That's why they came with Eritrean attire. So in this operation, for the people of Eritrea, for the government and people of Eritrea, for the people in government of Djibouti and Somalia and Kenya people and government, South Sudan people and government, I extend great appreciation and thanksgiving. Everybody helped us. Sudan, as usual, stood with us, gave us great support. Eritrea, Djibouti, Kenya, Sudan, the same. Our neighbor countries, we needed them. Would continue to work together in a spirit of brotherhood. We need them. In connection with this, the Northern Division attack, now that we know the background that I just relayed, this junta, they insulted us, we didn't respond. They conspired all sorts of economic and other conspirations, we kept quiet. They created havoc here and there, we kept quiet. They conducted illegal elections, they expected war, we didn't do anything. All sorts of political incitements, we kept our cool. It's then we went to attack. But before we go there, the Northern Division and all other divisions combined together would not amount the Northern Division, be it military capacity-wise, armament-wise. The military depot is in Tigray. We don't even have a single bullet here. The rockets, missiles, all of it are in Tigray region. The missile operators are from one region. To bring that rocket, there was a lot of attempts done. We gathered them and we tried to negotiate with them. We should remove the rockets, but they would tell the junta, and the next day they would close the door with women and children. They said the armament is not going to move there. They said with the pretext that Eritreans would fight against us, but they were getting ready for another war. So we had to do whatever we could, but we could not remove the rockets. We asked for the keys, the starters. They brought us the key. But they're still using the rockets. By the way, our defense force, the armaments, the mechanized, for years was purposely made to gather in that region. They wanted to collect forces in that particular place. This is an open knowledge. The tanks are there, all sorts of armaments are there. Even the Ethiopian depot or oil depot is there. So when we talk of mobility, the army could not do anything. We cannot replace that by new purchases for the lack of money. So with the Special Force, Air Force and rockets, there was a lot of work done. You accuse us not acting in time, but we needed even more time. Because to come up with commanders, we cannot just assign. It's a career that requires time to develop. Having done that, keeping all our armaments, what led us to make preparation is when we had a conflict in other part, not thinking that there would be traitors to such an extent. We asked that some of the army and the armaments should come to help. They said no, the army is not going and the armament is not going. They're actually sending forces against us, encouraging other forces to come and fight us. This is what they have been doing, and then on that particular night at 11 p.m. this junta disrupted communication from Addis Ababa. They stopped power, electric power and telephone communication. So they gathered in 50, 60, so that they would not communicate with one another. They gathered, they rounded up with the militia, and they sent elders for those who refused to cooperate. Very disgraceful acts of terrorism and violence. And then they killed many, they took many captive. Those who were killed, they were tied with ropes and they were totally naked, the bodies. By the way, a dead body has no race. It's when life is there that we talk of ethnicity. A dead body does not have any language, just a body. But to think that a dead body is an Oromo and a Tigray, it's inhuman. Okay, kill them, but not burying them, it's shameful. Let alone an army that fought for you and did a lot of good on your behalf. So arrogance, pride is bad. It brings about destruction, and it has a blinding force. If we have this power and these armaments. That's the way that's the reason that led them to act like this. Before this, they have openly said, if you don't do what we tell you to do, would create havoc, not only in Ethiopia, in East Africa. This is not in, they don't say this in secret. They speak this to diplomats, and the diplomats get afraid. They said if you touch them, they would disrupt the peace of the area. What is very sad about this is an old ape wants to jump like a young one, and it gets into trouble. These people have no knowledge of military science at all whatsoever. They just have old mentality, be it economic or military. Let me give you two examples for this. In the American Civil War, the thing that American Civil War created was in the southern part of the US, and the north there was a conflict around slavery. Abraham Lincoln wanted to demolish slavery, and those in the south with huge plantations, they wanted to continue with the system. So General Jefferson Davis, who was a graduate of War Academy in the US, he became a chief of staff in the south, and then they said we have seceded, and they said they don't respect Abraham Lincoln. That was the campaign. Abraham Lincoln, just like us, he begged for years and took the situation in a lot of patience. But one night, just like what happened in Ethiopia, in South Carolina, a mechanized army, they attacked it during the night. That was led by General Davis. They stole armaments also. Abraham Lincoln was not prepared for this. That man said, I am an army qualified general, and nobody can fight the way I do. Abraham Lincoln gathered up militias. The first thing he did was he closed the border of the southern border, that southerners would not be able to leave their country. When they attacked the northern division, the first thing we did was we closed the border. Second thing was, just like the American Civil War, we want to tell the Americans that the same struggle that you faced happened in Ethiopia. It took you 3.5 years to reunify the two parts of the US because you deemed it unconstitutional. So the same thing happened. The constitution was attacked. It didn't take us 3 years, but only 3 weeks. If you understand that this way, it would be good. The second relationship with what happened in the US was in the Second World War. The Japanese attacked the American army at the Pearl Harbor unexpectedly, just like what happened in Tigray. The American Parliament decided to defend itself. It used even a nuclear bomb against Japan and totally destroyed Japan. As you know, in the American Civil War, the arrogance of General Jefferson, even 20 years after the war, the southern part of the US took more than 20 years to rebuild its community. The keys of Japan in the Second World War, the leader of the war, General MacArthur, four-star MacArthur, after defeating winning the battle in Tokyo, the only part that was remaining standing is the American camp, military. Apart from that, all infrastructure was totally demolished. But not only that, up until today, because of what happened then, the generations after generations are suffering all sorts of sicknesses. It's open knowledge.
ያረጀ እሳቤ ይዞ
So this age-old
ነው
mentality
ይህ ስግብግብ ጁንታ
is
የሰሜን
what this junta
ኮማንድ ላይ
had in mind
ጦርነት
when it
ያወጀው።
attacked
ማወጅ
the
አይደለም።
northern division.
አንድ የኛ ሰው አለ እዛ
This
በእኛ ሰው
certain
አማካኝነት
individual
ተነስቶ
told us the
መብረቃዊ ጥቃት
story.
ፈጽሜ ሰሜን ጉንበጀር
He said it was an attack, swift attack like lightning. They openly declared that.
መሪዎች እየወጡ
The,
ሰሜን
the,
ከኛ
the,
ጋር ነው
the
የሚዋጋው
leaders
ያሉ።
of the region said the
ማለት
northern
20 ዓመት
force is with us, but northern force is for 20 years.
20
They
ዓመት
fought with the Eritreans. Not only that,
የሰማይ
but
ጥቃት
for 20
እንዳይፈጽም
years,
የተከላከለ
it
ኃይል ነው።
protected the region against
ሰሜን
further
ግን
attack.
ከእነሱ ጋር ከሆነ
If the northern
ምንም ማሰብ አያስፈልግም።
division is with
ድሮ
them,
የተከላከለ ነው፣ ጩኸት አያስፈልግም።
then it's a lost
እሱን
case.
ይዞ መከላከል ትጥቁ ያለው እዛ ሰው
The
ያለው እዛ።
force is there, the people is there.
በአንድ ሚዲያ ከኛ ጋር
In one media they say
ተዋግተው
they are with us,
ተዋግተን
and the second day they say they fought
የሚገለባበጡ
against
ጉዳዮች
us. All sorts of conflicting reports.
ንጹሐንን ማስጨረስ
Killing
አሁን የማይካድራው በምን አማርኛ ይገለጻል?
civilians. How can you describe the situation that happened in Maikandra?
የታጠቁ እንኳን ቢሆኑ
These are totally
ምናልባት
unarmed civilians.
ምንም የማያውቁ ቀን ሰራተኞች
They're just
ሰብስቦ
daily laborers.
በቀን ሸቅለው የሚኖሩ ሰዎችን ሰብስቦ
You gather them
በላባቸው የሚኖሩ
up,
ሰዎች ሰብስቦ በጅምላ
daily
ማረድ።
laborers, and kill them in
ይሄ
mass.
የፖለቲካ ሽንፈትና
This is
ውድቀት
political
የሞራል
destruction
ዝቅጠት
and
ያመጣው
moral
ስብዕና
deprivation.
መጥፎ ድርጊት።
It's terrible.
ወታደሩም
Within
በዜጎቻችን
the military and
በነገራችን
also
ላይ
in the
በወታደሩ
civilians.
ብቻ
Not
አይደለም።
only, by the way, it's not only in
አካባቢ
military,
ካምፕ
but
አለ፣
in Shire
የስደተኞች
we
ካምፕ።
have
በካምፕ
camps
የነበሩ
for refugees.
ሌላ ብሔር ተወላጆችን እንዲሁ አፍነው አስረዋል።
They have also imprisoned people from there.
በዩኒቨርሲቲ የሰማችሁት ነው።
You've
ተማሪዎች
heard what they did in
በሁሉ የተሰራው
universities.
ስራ። ዓላማው የነበረው
The purpose was
መጀመሪያ ሰሜን ዕዝ መምታት፣
to hit the northern division,
ጎንደርና ወልዲያን መያዝ።
and also the second day take
ጎንደርና
Gondar and
መያዝ፣
Woldia
አዲስ
captive,
አበባ ላይ ባሉ ኤጀንቶች
and
አዲስ አበባ
using their
ይፈነዳል፣
agents in
አዳማ
Addis
ይፈነዳል፣
Ababa,
ይፈነዳል፣ አገር ይበጠበጣል። ከዛ በኋላ የፈለጉትን
use
ማድረግ
destruction in Adama, in
ይችላሉ።
Addis Ababa with
እዚህም
bombs,
ያሉ ኃይሎች
and those
የተዘጋጁ ነበር። መንግስት
in Addis
ሲቀየር
Ababa, they
የሆነ
were ready to act for them.
የመጀመሪያው ስራችን
So the
ጎንደርና
first work
ወልዲያን መያዝ እንዳይቻል
was to prevent any
ለዚህም አስቸኳይ ጊዜ አዋጅ
attack against Gondar and Woldia.
በማግስቱ
So the second day we came up with
የታጠቀ
a
ኃይል
law of
በአንድ
state of
ኮማንድ
emergency. Came up with one
የኦሮሚያ
command
ልዩ
center.
ኃይል
So
በኦሮሚያ አካባቢ
Oromia
ያለው
special
መከላከያ
forces
ሙሉ በሙሉ ስለሚወጣ በርካታ ኃይል ስለሚወጣ
had,
ያን
had
ሸፍኖ
to cover for the defense
በዛ
force
የመጣውን
because the
ጠላት
defense force
እንዲመክት
had to relocate to north.
ሚሽን ተሰጠው። የመከላከያ የኦሮሚያ ልዩ ኃይል ከፍተኛ ውጊያዎች ሲያካሂድ ነበር።
So
ከፍተኛ
there was
ጥቃትም አድርሷል ነበር።
a lot of attacks
ያ ባይሆን ኖሮ
by
መሀል
the
ሀገር እንታመስ ነበር ማለት
Oromia
ነው።
special forces defending
የአፋርና
the country
የአማራ ክልል
against
ጊዜያዊ ልዩ ኃይሎች
anti-peace forces
በተለይ በድንበር አካባቢ ላይ
and the Mahara special forces until the defense force comes
ጥቃት
to help.
የሚያጋጥማቸው ኤሪያዎች ላይ በከፍተኛ ተጋድሎ
They fought
ተከላክለው
fiercely defending themselves and the region
የመስፋት ፍላጎት አስቆመዋል።
and stopped the progress of the enemy in Benishangul.
ልዩ ኃይልና
Special
የፌዴራል ፖሊስ
forces and the federal police
በመተባበር ቤንሻንጉል
worked
አካባቢ
together
ያለውን ስራ
and handled the situation there.
ፌዴራል ፖሊስ
The federal
እዚህ ከተማ
police
ውስጥ ሆነው በፈንጅ በቦምብ ሊያሰቃዩ የሚያስቡ ሰዎችን
were
ቀን ከሌት ፈትሸው እንዲያስቀሩ
dismantling
ሰፊ
forces
ስራ
that wanted to create havoc in the city.
ለእነዚህ ሁሉ ከፍተኛ ክብር
All these require
በተለይ
a great
በተለይ
honor,
የመከላከያ
especially
ኃይልን በሚመለከት
that of Defense Force,
የተከበረው ምክር ቤት
Honorable Parliament.
ብዙ ሀገራት
In many countries,
የመከላከያ ሰራዊት ዩኒፎርም ለብሰው
with
ታክሲ
uniforms,
የሚጠብቁ ከሆነ
when they stand for taxis, they give them
አውሮፕላን ተራ
preference.
የሚሄዱ ከሆነ
In the
ቅድሚያ
airports,
ይሰጣሉ።
they give them
ዩኒፎርም
preference
የሚቀበልበት ምክንያት
because they respect the uniform, because in time of difficulty, it's quite costly. We don't really give them salaries,
ቢያንስ እንደ ሀገርና ሕዝብ መለዮ የምናገረው
but as a nation,
ለሰልፎች
we
ቅድሚያ
should
የምንሰጥ
give honor
ውትድርና ለሀገር የሚከፈል
to
ዋጋ
soldiers,
መሆኑን
recognizing
የምናምን ዜጎችና
that
የምናደርግ መሆን
they
አለብን።
pay the highest price
አለበለዚያ
for their country.
የኢትዮጵያ ጠላት እንደ ማሽሩም ነው።
Otherwise, Ethiopians have many enemies.
ይሄ ሲባል ይሄ
When
ነው።
you stop this, the other one comes
ይሄ
up.
ሀገር እንዲቀጥል
If we
ከፈለግን
want this country to
ለመከላከያ
continue,
ክብር መስጠት
we need to honor the defense
ይህን
forces.
ሁሉም ዜጎች ማድረግ አለባቸው። ማገልገልም አለብን፣ ማክበርም
So we
አለብን።
have to engage in the
ይህን
military
በማድረግ
and honor the military at the same
በቀጣይ
time.
የሚገጥመንን ፈተና የምንወጣው
It's this way that we can
ጦርነቱን በሚመለከት ግን
defend
ከዚህ
further
ቀደሙ
attacks
በግርድፉ ሳይሆን ትንሽ ገባ ገባ እያልኩ ለተከበረው ምክር ቤትና ኢትዮጵያ
concerning
ሕዝብ መግለጽ እፈልጋለሁ።
the battle.
የመጀመሪያው ስራ
The first work that we
ወደ
engaged in
ጎንደርና
was
ጎጃም እንዳይስፋፉ
to
ማድረግ፣
stop them from encroaching Gondar and Gojam.
ወደ ኤርትራ እንዲያፈገፍግ ያዘዝነው ኃይል አለ።
And
መገናኛ የለም፣ ስልክ
there
የለም።
was a part of an army that we wanted them to flee to Eritrea, but communication was an issue.
በተለየ መንገድ ለመክፈት መሞከር፣
But
እንዲሸሹ
we tried to
ማድረግና
communicate
በኤርትራ
on the
በኩል ደግሞ
command
ሰው በእግሩ
so that they would
ሄዱ
flee to
እንዲላቸው መልዕክት ማድረስ ነው።
Eritrea.
ግን ምን ያክል ሰው እንደወጣ
We don't know how many have fled there because they have not
መጀመሪያ
received the command
አዛዥ
properly.
አንቀበልም ብለው የሰሜን እዝ አዛዥ
Northern
በሚመለከት
Division head,
የተከበረው ምክር ቤት እንዲያውቅ
what I
ፈልገው
want the parliament to know,
ጀነራል ድርባ
General Direba,
የሰሜን እዝ አዛዥ
head of
ሆኖ እያገለገለ
Northern Division,
ውጊያው ከመፈጠሩ ከ15
15 days ahead of the war, he sat with a meeting there after they had lunch.
ከምሳ በልቶ ይታመማል፣
He became ill, sick,
ራሱ ይስታል።
became unconscious.
ጦር ኃይሎች ይገባል።
He was
አብሮ የነበሩ
hospitalized,
ሰዎች አቅምሰውት ነው የሚል መረጃ
and
መጣ።
some say he
እንደዚህ
was
አይነት ነገር እንዳታወሩ፣
poisoned.
በሜዲካል ይጣራ።
And we said, no, let it be confirmed now. We didn't want the news to come out.
እስከዛ
General
ድረስ
Direba, up until
ተነስቶ
this
ስራ መስራት
moment,
የሚችልበት
is
ደረጃ
not in a position to resume work.
እሱ ሲታመም
When he
ብን ነው
became
እኛ
sick,
ምደባ የሄድነው እንጂ ምደባ ፈልገን
we
አይደለም።
wanted to replace him. That's
ለካ
why.
እሱን በማኮላሸት
But that was purposely done, and refusing the new leadership that they have conspired other
ዝም
moves.
ብለን ሰው መደብን።
So we assigned another person to replace him. They sent him back. So they take captive the deputy leader, and they broke communication. You know the story.
እንዳይስፋፉ ማቆም
So our first move was
ሮብለት
to stop their
ማክሰኞና
move
ሮብለት የለም እኛ
towards
መረጃ
Gondar
ማግኘት ችግር ነበር ለይቱ ሙሉ።
and
ሮብለት ግን
Gojam.
ያን ጨርሰው
That was on
ወደ
Tuesday.
አማራ ክልል ጥቃት ጀመሩ፣ መከላከል
So
ጀመሩ።
we began defense work on Wednesday. We started to gather up our forces. After 1-2 days, we organized ourselves
እንዳልኳችሁ ድንበር ለመዝጋት ሞከር።
and we tried to close the borders.
ድንበር ለመዝጋት ከሞከርን
When
በኋላ
we did that,
የስበት ማዕከሉን ተረጋግቶ ማሰብ መምራት እንዳይችል እያጠቃን ከትግራይ ወደ ኤርትራ ሄደውን ጦር
the
ለማወቅ
force that fled to Eritrea, we wanted to know how many of our forces are in Eritrea. I went there taking 3 generals.
ጀነራሎች ይዘን የሄድንበት ዋና
The reason we
ምክንያት
did that was we wanted to see the situation of our
ያለበት ነገር
army
አውቀን ለማቀር ነው። ጦሩ
and
ጋር
to
ስንሄድ
design a plan. When we went there,
ከፍተኛ አሳዛኝ ነገር
what we
ስለነበረ
saw was
የሄድነው።
very tragic.
ጀነራል አበባው ታደሰ
General Ababao
ለዓመታት
Tadesse
የመራው ያደራጀው ኃይል ነው።
is an army that he led for many
ጦሩ
years.
እሱን ሲያይ ሲያለቅስ
So when they saw the general,
የፈለግከውን
they
እርምጃ
began
ትወስድብኛል፣ አልመለስም።
crying.
የምገባው ከጦሩ ጋር
The general said, I'm not coming back with you. I'll
General
stay with the
Getachew
army.
Gudina
General Getachew
ከትግራይ
Gudina,
ከመጣ 3 ወር አይሞላውም። የራሱ እዝ ነው።
it's his own army. It's his children that have been killed.
ከጦሩ ጋር አለቀሰ፣ አልመለስም አለ።
He cried there. He says, I'm not coming up with the General Baj Adebele.
ሶስቱ ነበሩ የሄዱት።
The 3 of them went with me.
ጦሩ በጣም የሚያስደንቅ ጀግንነት
The
ነበር።
army had its
በተለይ አንዳንዶቹን በኋላ
spirit on. Some of it I would tell you later. They are still with their guns, some of them. They have even apprehended arms, and some were totally naked.
ይጠውላለጉ አሉ።
Some were
ልመናቸው በፍጥነት
very
ይህንን
tired.
junta ወደ
So
ህግና
their
ደንብ
question
እንዲያቀርቡ
was,
የሚል ነው።
take us back in. We want to fight this
በዚህ
junta.
ምክንያት የሚያስፈልጋቸውን የጎደላቸውን ካየን ከለየን
So
በኋላ
after doing situational analysis,
ምደባ አድርገን አስተካክለን
we
በዛ
came up with
ሳይድ
a new
ጥርጣሬም አልነበረውም።
organization.
አፍሪካ ያለው
But the enemy thought that that part was already dismantled. We assigned
በዚህ
leaders
የማጥቃትና ስበት ማዕከል እያዳከምን እዛ ስንደራጅ ቆየን።
and began to organize ourselves concerning the rockets.
ከሮኬት ጋር ቀድሜ
As
እንዳነሳሁላችሁ
I've mentioned earlier,
ኢትዮጵያ ያላት ሮኬቶች 100% እዛ ነው ያሉት።
our rockets are there 100%, and they are all from that part of Ethiopia. We wanted to bring the arms there, but we did not
ይሄ
succeed.
ሮኬት አደጋ ያስከትልብናል።
But now,
ያሰጋል።
recognizing that these
መጀመሪያ
rockets would be
ሮኬቱ
deadly,
እንዳይጠቀሙበት እናድርግ ብለን
let's
ስናጣራ
destroy the
ሁለት መረጃ
rockets.
ነው
And when we had information,
አንደኛው
one of it was
መቀሌ ያለው
the rocket in
300
Makale
ኪሎ ሜትር ድረስ መጓዝ
that
የሚችለው
can be reached 300 kilometers.
ሮኬቱ አለ።
The rocket is there.
ሮኬቱን የሚያስተኩስ መሳሪያ አለ።
and they can use it.
ሮኬት ያለው ከተማ
The
ውስጥ ነው።
rocket is in the city,
ማስተኮሻው ወጣ ይላል ትንሽ።
and the item they need to use it is out of Makale, and the less powerful one is in Adwa and Metek.
ሁሉም ወታደራዊ ሰዎች እኔም ባለሁበት ተወያይተን
So we discussed and had a debated discussion, let's hit it or not. There was a lot of debate.
የተከበረው ምክር ቤት
Honorable Parliament must know
መቀሌ ላይ የተከማቸው ሚሳኤል
the missiles that was
ምናልባት
in
መቀሌ
Makale.
ሊያጠፋው ይችላል።
If we hit it, it can destroy the whole city. We cannot be sure of the outcomes.
አያጠፋውም። ቴክኒካሊ
Some technical people say it will not be destructive. Some technical people say no, it could prove to be costly. It was risky.
ይሄ እንዳይሰራ ማድረግ ይቻላል ስለተባለ ማብሊያው ከከተማ ውጭ ነው።
So the item that couldn't
ከተማ ውስጥ ያለው ግን
trigger the rockets were out of Tigray.
አደገኛ ስለሆነ አድዋ ላይ ያለው ግን ከተማ ውስጥ
But in Adwa, the rockets are in Metek. If we destroy that, it would destroy the city. So we didn't want to go into such a risk.
ከተማ ውስጥ ከሆነ አናርግ ብለን በፍጥነት ጠላት ተዘጋጅቶበታል። ከቦታ ቦታ እየቀያየረ ያው እንደምታውቁት የውር ድንብር ሙከራዎች አድርጓል። ሮኬቱን ይሄን ካደረግን በኋላ የተከተልነው አካሄድ ሳያው የተከላከሉ ኃይሎች
the groups that were defending without knowing, we gave them a chance to give in, to stop wars in the urban, to protect our citizens from the consequences, and also to make sure the conflict, the war ends very soon. And also to deteriorate the capacity of the enemy to defend itself. The force of the junta, disregarding Humara, took it 15 years to get to Makale. We've been able to do that in 15 days. They walked, we walked. The victorious defense force from the tip of Gondar to Shirre walked. They didn't use cars. Some of you said we delayed, but they walked. The road is tiring. You won't even drive a Land Cruiser. It's really tiring. They walked. In order to do this, our strategy, I'll explain it in detail so you know the truth. General Belai, the victorious General Masala, did the first defense on the side of Gondar and also the occupation of Humara, together with their counterparts. Satanao Belai and victorious Masala are the children of Ethiopia. They never had a consultant, they never had a different force, but they walked in. Our general in the west assembled the army, first controlled our trench. You don't know them in detail. If you know Nagahalo, Badme, Biara, it controlled these places and controlled Shiraro. And this was the mission given to General Abao. General Belai controlled Shiraro and crossed Takaze and joined General Ababao's forces. Abao controlled Shiraro. Humara was controlled by Belai and Masala. These forces combined controlled Shiraro and Aksum. Between Rama and the area and the conflicts that took place, General Bacha organized the forces. The mission given to Bacha was to control Techo area and to cut on Adwa. On the side of Zalambasa,
ከመያዙ በፊት
before controlling it.
የተሰጠው ሚሽን
General Bacha was given a mission, Sorana,
ኃይል ማደራጀትና
to
ጀምር ሲባል
organize forces
መሄድ ነው።
to
እሱ
start
የሚጠበቁ ኃይሎች አሉ።
attacking when it's given
በዛላምበሳ በኩል
orders
ድኩላው
from the side
ጀነራል
of
ጌታቸው
Zalambasa. General
የወጣውን
Getachew
ኃይል አደራጅቶ
organized the
በከፍተኛ
forces
ጀግንነትና ቆራጥነት
and was
Zalambasa
victorious in
Africa
zealous motion controlled
ነው ሚሽን የተሰጠው።
Zalambasa. That was the mission given to him.
ልክ የነ ጀነራል በላይና አበባው ሽሬ ሲደርስ የአድዋው
When the other forces reached Shiraro,
የተዘጋጀ ቀድሞ
the other
ሚሽኑን የያዘ
forces were strong
ኃይል
enough
ነበር።
and to reach at their places because we assembled forces in different
በዚህ
locations.
ምስራቅ በኩል
From the east,
በተለይ ከባድ መሳሪያን
especially
በማስተባበር
in organizing heavy
ወታደራዊ
artilleries,
ጀነራል አለምሸት ነበር።
General Alamshet was in command.
ከሱ ጋር
Together with him,
ነጎድጓዱ ጀነራል ሰለሞን
General
አይበገሬው
Salamon
ጀነራል ዘውዱ ነበሩ።
and General Zaudu
ይሄ
were
አስተላለፍ
together.
ቋሚ አይደለም።
This was not a permanent assignment.
አንድ ቦታ ሲያዝ የጀመርነው በዚህ መንገድ ቢሆንም በኋላ
However, we
የተደራረቡ
started
ጉዳዮች
this way. There were
ቶሎ
shifts.
ሲተፈለጉ አንዳንዶቹ ወደ ሌላ
When we went in them in different fronts, we were reshuffling them.
ምርጫው ቤዝ ያደረገው
The
እያንዳንዱ
choice
ተራራ
based on an
የእያንዳንዱ
understanding of
ተራራ ከማወቅ
each mountain,
መሽለኪያ ቦታዎችን
the
ከማወቅ
height, and the passes.
ሳተናው ጀነራል አበባው
General Ababao,
ከኤርትራ ጋር በነበረው ውጊያ
in a
ያንን ከተማ
war
በስም
between Eritrea, knows
በዝርዝር የሚያውቀው ነው።
every detail in the area, the
እንዲሁም
terrain,
ጀነራል ጌታቸው
and General
ዛላምበሳ አካባቢ
Getachew
ያንን
also
ከዛ በኋላ
understands
በነበረው
Zalambasa and the area.
ጠላት
Therefore,
ከሚያውቀው ያልተናነሰ
We know that they know it,
እውቀት
if
ይዘው
not equal,
ውጊያውን
if not better,
አንገት
equally
አስቸጋሪ
as the
ቦታዎች፣
enemy.
ተራራ ቦታዎች በመለየት
They were able to
ለማካሄድ
identify terrains and
ይጠቅመን
difficult locations, and we used them for that.
እዚህ ድል ቁርሱ ጀነራል ብርሃኑ ጁላ
General Brahanu Jula, the
ማዘጋጃዎች
victorious,
ይዞ
had two
እጅግ የሚያስደምሙ
forces
24 ሰዓት ከሲቹዌሽን ሩም የማይወጡ
that never left the situation room for 24 hours.
በኮማንድ ፖስት
These
አጠቃላይ
generals,
ሂደቱን ሲመራ ቆይቷል። ከነዚህ
he was
ውስጥ
leading
አንዱ
the forces,
ሀገር ወዳዱ
using these
ጀነራል
forces.
ዮሐንስ ይገኝበታል። በሀገሩ የማይደራደረው ጀነራል ዮሐንስ
General Johannes is amongst them. He
አነፍናፊውና
doesn't
የጠላትን ኮቴ የሚከተለው ጀነራል አስራት
compromise the issue of his country.
ካርታ
General
በደንብ
Asrat,
የሚያነበው
who
ሻለቃ
reads
መኮንኑ ጀነራል ተስፋዬ
the map like a ground, General
ሎጂስቲክስን
Tasfaye,
የሚያሳልጠው
the
ጀነራል
logistics head, General
የሰው ኃይሉን
Abdurrahman,
በከፍተኛ ደረጃ
human resource,
የሚያመጋግበው ጀነራል ሀጫሉ፣
General Hachalu,
የጠላትን አቅም የሚገነባው ጀነራል ሀሰን፣
General Hassan,
ሌሎችም
who builds the force against the
በአንድ
enemy,
command post
and
ሆነው
others were
በሁለት
under the
ሚያዝያ
command
4
post
ቀንና
in
ማታ
true
ውጊያው
missions,
ነበሩ።
were engaged in
እዚህ
the
ጋር
war.
ሳልገልጽ የማላልፋቸው
One thing I don't
ሁለት
want to leave without mentioning here is
አንደኛው
that one,
አርድ አንቀጥቅጡ ጀነራል ይልማ
General Yilma,
የአየር ኃይል አዛዥ
leader of the Air Force,
በከፍተኛ ደረጃ ጀግኖችን ተዋጊዎች ይዞ
led his victorious
ባሰብነው
team
ባቀድነው ልክ ጦርነቱ ሊጠናቀቅ ከፍተኛ ተጋድሎ
and
ፈጽሟል።
sacrificed to complete the
ንስሩ
mission on time.
ጀነራል ሹማና
General
General
Shuma
Brahanu Bekele
and General Brahanu Bekele
ስፔሻል ፎርስን በማደራጀት በነገራችን ላይ
organized the
ስፔሻል
special
ፎርሶች
forces.
ስለ ጀግንነት
The
አላወራም።
special forces
የኢትዮጵያ አርቲስቶች፣ የኢትዮጵያ ጸሐፊዎች
victoriousness, I will not say much about it.
በዓለም ላይ የማታገኙት
Our
ጀግንነት
authors,
ፈጽመዋል።
our musicians, you have a work to do there.
እኔ ጀግንነት ብዬ ላወራው የምችለው
What I
ከሌላ
call
ሀገር
victory
ተዋግተን ቢሆን
would be if we were
እኛ
fighting
ለእኛ
against
ስለሆነ
any other country,
ነበር።
but
የተቃጠለውን
within
ታንክ
it
የኛ
was within
የሞተው የኛ
ourselves.
ስለሆነ
The ones who died and the ones who killed are,
ነገር
of
ግን
course,
ስፔሻል
our
ፎርስ
own. But the special
መቀሌ ላይ
force
አንድ ሰው
in
ሳይሞት
Mekelle
መቀሌ ለመቆጣጠር ያደረገው ጀግንነት
made sure we
በዓለም ይገልጻል።
controlled the city without killing a single
በሁመራ ላይ
person.
የነበረው ምሽግ
In Humera,
ይህ
it
ስፔሻል
destroyed
ፎርስ
a
አንድ
trench.
ሰው ሰውቶ ብርጌድ አፍርሷል።
Only one person was
በፊልም
sacrificed.
ካልሆነ በስተቀረ
Unless you
የሚቆይ
make a
ጀግንነት
movie
አያስብም።
out of it, it's difficult to talk the victoriousness of these people.
የሄደው ስፔሻል ፎርስ
The special force that went
ፊት
there
ለፊት ያየውን ጠላት አልዋጋም ብሎ
denied fighting the forces in front of it and
ውጊያ
infiltrated
የተኮሰው ውጊያውን
all the way
ከሚያባብሰው
in,
በኋላ
and the shots were fired from the back.
ጠላት ጨርሶ ጨርሶ በትኖ ጥይት ጨርሶ
They finished their bullets
በእጁ
after
ከናንቆ
removing the
ከተላቀቀ
enemies,
ተዋግተናል።
and some of them fought and took guns from the enemies.
በዚያ መንገድ ነው 15 ቀን
This
የፈጀው።
is
በ15
how
ቀን
they
ጦርነት
completed it in 15
የ15
days.
ዓመቱ ማለት ነው።
A 15 years war in 15
እዚህ
days.
ውስጥ ብዙ መጠቀስ ያለባቸው ሰዎች ቢኖሩም
Despite the fact that we have to
General
mention a lot of
Girma
people
Kababo,
here, General Girma
የሰባተኛ
Kababo, the
አዛዥ
7th Brigade Commander,
ክፍለ ጦሩ እየተዋጋች እስከደረስንበት ቀን ድረስ እሞታለሁ እንጂ መሳሪያዬን አልሰጥም ብሎ
decided not to give in his ammunition and weapons till the last moment and fought with its force and entered Eritrea. And the weapons he couldn't carry, he burned it down. When we went to Eritrea, we didn't expect to see that many weapons. General Mulalam, 5th Brigade, in the area of Humara, was fighting until the point possible. Bademe, 8th Brigade Commander, General Nasr Abadiga, used all its force till the end and controlled Shiraro.
እንደነዚህ አይነት አስደማሚ ሰዎች
We have this kind of incredible people,
በሕይወታቸው ቅንጣት
people
የማይሳሱ ጀግኖች
that don't care much about their lives. Had Ethiopia not
ካለምንም ጥርጥር
had these children,
ካለምንም ጥርጥር አሁን ያለንበትን ነገር የሚቀይር ነው።
it would have changed
እንደምናውቃቸው ሀገራት
where we are right now.
ኢትዮጵያን የሚያደርግ
It would have made our country like other
እዚህ
countries.
ውስጥ የትግራይ ሕዝብ ሚና
The role of the people of Tigray in all this
የትግራይ ሕዝብ አገር
and their
ወዳድነት
victoriousness, their love for the country, I want the Honorable House to take it into consideration. At the time of the conflict,
ባንዳ ተብሎ የተመታ ትግራይ አለ።
there was a
ገና
person
ሲጀመር አትምቷቸው ብሎ
who was shot because he denied
ከፍተኛ ሙከራ ያደረጉ
or he
ሰዎች አሉ።
opposed killing of
ወደ
the
ኤርትራ
army.
ከወጣው ጦር ጋር አብሬ እወጣለሁ ኢትዮጵያ ስትወጋ አልቀመጥም ብሎ የወጣ ትግራይ ተወላጅ አለ።
There are Tigrayans who left to Eritrea who didn't want to see
በሁመራ በኩል እንዴት መከላከያን ትመታላችሁ?
the war.
መከላከያ ጋር እየተዋጋ
There were others who joined the defense force and fought in the war.
ጉዳዩ የኢትዮጵያዊነትና
This is the issue of Ethiopianism
የኢትዮጵያና የትግራይ
vis-a-vis
አልነበረም።
the junta.
በኋላ ሽሬ ስንደርስ
When we reached Shire,
200 ብሬን ህዝቡ አመጡ አስረክቧል። ይሄ እናንተ ነው። እናንተ
we
ነው
received
ሰጥተውና እኛ አንመታችሁም።
200 weapons. When we reached Aksum,
ደብቆ አቆይቶ ይኸው ልጆቻችሁ ተረከቡ እስረኛ ፈተናል
40 injured
ብሏል ህዝቡ።
persons were given to us by the people. We had discussions in Mekelle yesterday. They said, "You're late.
ቶሎ
Now that you are here, please give us electricity and telecom. We want to get back to our
ከተማ
lives."
የሚታዩ ዱርዮችም የተበተነው ኃይልም
The forces
ጥፋተኞች
disintegrated into different parts
እንዳያካሂዱ ውድመት
in order
እንዳያደርሱ
to stop them from further actions and attacks.
ስራ ስሙ እንዳይጠለሽ በፍጥነት
They said,
አስተዳደር ይመስረት
"Please create a new administration."
የተቀበለው መቀሌ ነው።
They received us with warm hands.
አገር ወዳድ በመሆኑ አንድም
The army loved its country and didn't cause any distractions.
በምድር ብቻ አልተዋጋንም።
We didn't only fight on the ground.
አንደኛ ቅድም እንዳነሳው
As I've said earlier, in the army,
ወጥቶ ወደዛ ሲሄድ
when
አመራር
the
የሌለው
captain,
ሰው
the
ሆኗል።
commander, and everyone leaves,
ዋናው ትጥቅ
we
ተወስዷል።
didn't have a commander or a leader.
ቦታ የተሻለ ቦታ ተይዟል ለመከላከል የሚያመች በዲፕሎማሲ ቀደም ተብሎ
Diplomatic actions were
በየሀገራቱ ሎቢ የሚያደርጉ
lobbying on the part of the enemy in different parts of the
በሚዲያ ሎቢ
world.
የሚያደርጉ ሰዎች አሉ።
They were lobbying on the media
በሚዲያውም
also.
በዲፕሎማሲውም በሁሉም ነው ውጊያው የተከፈተው።
The war was on
በሁሉም
all
ተከፈተና
fronts,
ብዙዎቹ ወዳጆቻችን
and most of our friends
ንግግር ግቡ አሉ።
started pressuring us to get into discussions.
የተከበረው ምክር ቤት እንደሚያውቀው
As this honorable house
በጣም
knows,
የምንፈልገው ጦርነት በጣም ነው
we
የምንጠላው።
love to
ለምናውቀው
discuss. We hate war.
ለምነናል
We know its consequences. We begged
እስከ ጨፈጨፉን ጊዜ ድረስ
until the
ለምነናል።
time
ከዛ በኋላ ግን
they attacked us.
ጎንደርን ያዙ፣ ወልዲያን ያዙ፣
But after this,
አዲስ አበባ እንደፈለጋችሁ
controlling
አድርጉ
Gondar,
ማለት
Waldia, that was what's left to say.
የሆነ ጉዳይ አልነበረም።
It was not the issue of the army
እነሱ
only.
ነገር እየከረረ ሲሄድ ቶሎ ብሎ
When tensions grew, they started resorting politics. And if that's the case, you don't attack the northern division. No country will do this. If the army is attacked in any country will respond furiously. We know diplomacy. Ethiopia is a country that established the United Nations. Ethiopia is a country that established the African Union. You cannot tell us about multilateralism. We're known by peace. In Korea, in different parts of Africa, we served for peace. What we want to tell our friends is that if you want to be friends with us, you have to understand us also. We could be poor, but we have years of experience in being a government. More than some of your countries. We've been countries before your countries. We don't confuse a country and a government. We want you to understand that. Not today, even 100 years ago, we gave our neck to be free from colonialism. You don't have to forget that. And the third one is Honorable Speaker of the House, his victory is Ethiopia. No individual will sell his or her country for their benefit. We love peace, we work for peace, and you have to understand that. And if you understand what's ours, you should collaborate with us. No matter poverty we're in, will not give in our pride to others. Don't blame us. It's not our fault. This is in our blood, transmitted from our fathers. Well, money will not pressure us. You can only work together with us. You cannot win Ethiopia when you have Ethiopians living here. Today or tomorrow. You can't win as long as Ethiopians live on this land. We don't want you to think that way. You have to listen to us when we try to enforce the law. This is for the good friends. And there are others with hidden agenda. The hidden agenda is, I don't want to mention names, but our neighbors, all of them have powers of Dammaka and powers of Abiy. They'll say, Dammaka, move your forces here, Dammaka, move your forces there. They keep saying Dammaka and Abiy are not in agreement, let's have meeting in Kigali, and so on and so on. That's impossible to repeat in Ethiopia. Ethiopia has one government, and that government respects the law, upholds the rule of law, and can be asked according to the law, and gives respect to its people. As much as possible, it will create a democracy that looks like Ethiopia. We don't want to look like others. We want to look like ourselves. We will not have forces like other countries, competing forces. And those forces or those parties that has this kind of understanding, please drop it. Otherwise, there is no international government that does not understand what we have been doing. You heard my Kadra. We heard about my Kadra. We heard about our general being taken and corpse left on the streets. With those conditions, we can't have discussions. With who? Perhaps the Honorable House needs to understand the government of Ethiopia has been having discussions even during the time of war. in the past 2-3 weeks, while we're still into war, we're having dialogues. These dialogues were made with Dr. Mulu, who is the legal authority in Tigray. What will we do in Tigray? The first one is enforce the law. 2, don't fight in the city so the people won't be affected. Citizens will be okay then. And 3, start rehabilitating the regions, the cities, as soon as you occupy them. That was the mission given to us. We based on that. We cannot, the fact that we didn't sit and on a dialogue with enemies and with criminals does not make it that we were not interested in a dialogue. Somali and regions also said, we need peace. The fact that they said they need peace is an expression of their interest. It does not, however, mean that when you are attacked, definitely the scenarios will change, the responses will change. There are a lot of pressures, a lot of things are said that required its own war, this or that. We want you to understand we need peace, but if our sovereignty is affected, we will act. The other one is bringing criminals to court, was engaged in terrorism, killed and so on, different crimes. We have to see it in line with the operation. The first one and our own first objective is freeing those taken and returning the tanks taken from us. Thousands of injured persons came back. We still have forces with them. Those who are killed, we have taken control of our camps and government institutions. For instance, after controlling Mekelle, the army said, let me start searching. We said no. The army is only trained to fight, not to search. So they might cause damages. If an army member takes something there, it could quarrel our relationship. So we'll send trained persons later. Not even a single defense force entered the city. And in fact, in the cities they controlled, they haven't done anything that has to do with search and seizure. When we reached Mekelle, an area of Kwe and Najash, Wukro, whether you believe it or not, the farmers were harvesting as if nothing happened. They knew it was their own force. There was nothing unique. They knew the propaganda. The second ultimatum was we gave them 272 hours. Why? Why did you extend it? These are the questions raised from people. These had several objectives. The extension had objectives. The first one is when we reached Mekelle, the force that approached with that power assumed the junta was in Mekelle. So we needed to slow down and work on the emotions, otherwise we might regret our actions. They may march in assuming they handled or they're arresting the junta. Therefore, we needed to have a special plan to avoid damages. The second one, the junta were destroying wherever they went. So we thought they might even do something in Mekelle. And the third one is there are several people who doesn't want war at a grassroots level. So we needed to give them time to give in. We knew we could control it, but we wanted a plan. We wanted to calm down. We wanted to have the necessary forces with the necessary responsibilities. That's why we delayed. We said in a short period, and we completed it in a short period. Expedited, it could cause a problem. If we go late, it could also cause damages. So we completed it in time. In fact, the defense force had in its mind that it would complete the operation in 2 weeks. The government analyzed and extended it after doing analysis because we wanted to avoid distractions. The way forward is arresting criminals from wherever they are. They went to a certain location, they have feelings that they can fight, but they have to fight within themselves, within their own perception of killing, looting, and causing disagreements between people. And the youth of Tigray should not be siding with them. They can win prosperity if they want, not through war, but through peace and through election. This is why we're only fighting using ballots, not bullets.
Not a single of them died, but they just said, let's fight, meaning protect us. We don't want to die, just protect us. But who is naive to die for them to live? If they are really courageous, instead of leaving the people of Makale, they should have fought there themselves and sacrificed their lives. They leave the fighting for others and they flee for dear life. If the surrender would take them to court, we're following them up. They cannot go far. It's good if they give up themselves. They never die. From palace, when they leave, they said would administer the country from Addis. They said when they left, forget it, would be in Makale, and now they moved to Agar Salam, and that does not go a long way. Following work is building Tigray. Tigrayan people is under ration with lots of difficulties. This ration is getting smaller, sorry. So we need to address this dire economic situations. We need to support and organize the country concerning refugees. They say some 30,000 people have left the country. As the parliament knows, this path of reform, millions of people had been displaced, and we reorganized, brought people back. So we have the experience in various. We can do this in a week. The UN, the Sudan government, and our door is open. Let's work together to bring our people back. They are our citizens. But we have one problem. There's no women, there's no children. It's just the young that is called refugee. Who are these young people? Then time will tell. In Maikandra, if they have killed people in Maikandra, and if there is evidence, they will be held legally accountable. If it's an innocent citizen, tomorrow morning. There is a committee set up, we're ready. If the world wants to assist, our doors are open. We don't want our people to leave out of Ethiopia, but 30,000 is not too much because we have dealt with millions of internally displaced people. There are some people that want to magnify for political gain this incident. Political discussion in Tigray with the legal, apart from legal parties from Ararat, Tigrayan political parties, Prosperity Party, and other legal entities, apart from them, nobody else can administer the country. Tigray is an honored people, they can administer themselves now that they are free from repression. They will conduct an election with its own people, and they will have their own self-administration. The junta would be handled by the continuing operation. Even for the junta, I have an advice.
አንድ ሰውና ሁለት ሰው ወንጀለኛ ላለማስያዝ ተብሎ
not
ይሄ
in
ሁሉ
order
ነገር ተፈጠረ
to
መጀመሪያ
save one or two
አሁን
people,
እኛ
two
ወታደር
individuals,
ሆኖ
all
የከዳንን
this happened.
ወታደር ራሱ ህግ አለው እሱ ይዳኛል ፖለቲካ ላይ
When it comes to
የምንፈልጋቸው
politics,
30 40 ሰው አይበልጡም
30 or 40 people that we want
ቁልፎቹ
to apprehend.
30 40 ሰው እጁን ላለመስጠት ብሎ
So
ወጣት ማስፈጀት
30,
የለም።
40 people to save their lives,
በህግ ላይ
they should
አይገደልም፣
not
በህግ
create
ይጠየቃል።
the destruction of many youth people. They will be
በሰላሳ
held
ሰው የሚፈርስ
accountable.
ክልል እንዳይኖር ሰፊ ስራ መስራት
So
አለበት
a lot of work
ወደፊት
needs to
ስራችን
go into it.
መገንባት
We'll continue
ማረጋጋት
building,
ሰላምን ማምጣት
stabilizing, bringing
ከዚህ ውጪስ
peace. Apart
የሚቀጥለውን
from
ምርጫ
that,
ዲሞክራሲያዊ
we
ማድረግ
will work to make sure
አሁንም
that the
የተከበረው
coming
ምክር ቤት ማወቅ ያለበት
election will be
በኢትዮጵያ ዴሞክራሲ
democratic.
ፍቱ መድኃኒት ነው
For Ethiopia, democracy
ምርጫው
is the
ተአማኒ መሆን
real
አለበት
healing medicine.
ዲሞክራሲያዊ መሆን
Has to
አለበት
be
ምርጫ
accountable,
ቦርድ
free and fair
በሚያስቀምጠው ስኬጁል
elections
የሚፈጸም መሆን አለበት
as per
ለዚህ ሁላችን
rules and
ልንገዛ
regulations
ዝግጁ
of
መሆን
the
አለብን
electoral board. We
ይሄ
need,
ምክር
or
ቤት
we
ብዙ
all
ድምጾች
need to
የሚሰሙበት መሆን አለበት
be hold
ዋስትናችን እሱ ነው
accountable to that, and the parliament
ይህ ትግራይ
must do a follow-up and
ኢትዮጵያም
monitoring
ይሰራል
work towards this, and would work for the
ከውጭ
people of
አንጻር
Tigray.
ጎረቤት ማስቀደማችን ጠቅሞናል
It's good that
ወደፊት ይቀጥላል
we have a very good relationship with our
አጠናክረን
neighbors,
ወደፊት
and this would
እንቀጥላለን
continue in the future.
የኢትዮጵያ ሕዝብን በትብብር
The
ትግራይን
people
መልሶ
of
ለመገንባት
Ethiopia
መዘጋጀት
would
አለበት
galvanize together to
ዳሜጁን በደንብ ካየን
rebuild
በኋላ
Tigray,
መንግስት የሚሰራውን
having
መንግስት
assessed
እንሰራለን
the damage.
ሕዝባችን ተባብሮ
The
መገንባት
government
አለበት
and the people at large need to engage in the rebuilding process of Tigray.
በመጨረሻ
And lastly,
ለውጮችና
for
ለውስጥ
foreigners
ያለኝ
and
መልእክት
also for those within the country, the
ከውጭ
message that I
ከየትኛውም
have is from
ከኢትዮጵያ
out
ጋር
of
በድርድር
Ethiopia,
በስምምነት መስራት ለሚፈልጉ
that
በጣም
want to
በራችን
engage in any
ነገር ግን በግል
collaboration. We're free,
በኢንትሪግ
but
በጨዋታ
those in conspiracy and
ኢትዮጵያን
intrigue,
ለማሸነፍ የሚያስቡ
those
ኃይሎች ካሉ
forces that want
ቁጭ
to
ብሎ ታሪክ እንዲማሩ
defeat
ነው
Ethiopia,
መክራቸው
let them
አይቻልም።
learn from history. It's impossible.
በሰላም
But in a
በውይይት
peaceful manner,
በዲፕሎማሲ ብቻ ነው ከእኛ
diplomatic
ጋር
routes,
መስራት የሚቻለው
the door is open.
ለውጮቹ ያለኝ
That's the message I have
ለውስጥ
for
ያለኝ ምክር
foreigners, and for those within the country. The advice that I have
ጁንታውን በሚመለከት
concerning the junta,
በግል ከከበደም ከተሰማም ጥላቻ የለኝም
I
በግሌ።
don't have a
እናንተም
personal
እንዳይኖራችሁ።
animosity and hatred to
ጥላቻችን
anybody there.
እሳቤው ነው።
It's with the
በስራው ነው።
mentality and with the works that I am
አንደኛውን
against.
ጁንታ አባርደን ሌላ ጁንታ
If we
እንዳንሆን
remove one
ጥንቃቄ
junta and come up with another one, it would be a total
ይህ
loss.
ጁንታ ነው አማራ
loss.
ኦሮሞውን ትግሬ ምናምን
It is
እያለ
this
በዘር ያባላል።
junta that created
በዘር
ethnic
የምንጠላ
difference
ከሆነ
and
እኛም
animosity.
ጁንታዎች ነን ማለት ነው።
If we hate each other on ethnic
ስለዚህ
basis,
የትግራይ
then we
ተወላጆች
become
ከትግራይ
another
የሚሆኑ
junta.
ከትግራይ ውጭ ያሉ
So Tigrans
ከጁንታው
both
ጋር
in
ትስስር
Tigray
የሌላቸው
and
ከሆኑ
in other
ኢትዮጵያዊ
part of
መሆናቸውን
Ethiopia
አምነን
that are not
ማክበር
linked with the junta,
ይጠበቃል።
they are Ethiopians.
ይህን
We need to
ካላደረግን
protect them. We need to honor them.
ቦታው ተጫዋቹ
If we
ይቀየራል
don't
እንጂ
do that, we just
መጥፎ ድርጊት
we just change the
ይህን
players.
ያደረግ
That's
መላ
all we can
ኢትዮጵያ
do.
ሕዝብ ከፍተኛ ጥንቃቄ
So
ማድረግ አለበት።
a lot of care needs to go into
መከላከያ፣
that, be it in defense
የትኛውም
forces,
ሲቪል
police,
ስራ
and also civilian
የትግራይ
work.
ተወላጆች በሚመለከት አስፈላጊው ጥበቃና እንክብካቤ
And we need to give them
ባለፉት ጊዜያት
protection.
የተወሰኑት ከስራ እንዲወጡ
And
ተደርጓል።
some Tigrayans
እነሱም መገንዘብ
have been
ያለባቸው
forced to leave out of
የተከበረው ምክር ቤት
their
ማወቅ
work,
ያለበት
and
ሁለት ነገር አለ።
what they
አንደኛ
themselves need to know,
እዛ
and the parliament need to do,
ከፍተኛ ጭፍጨፋ
is there's a
ተካሂዷል።
lot of destruction in Tigray,
ያን የሚያውቅ
mass
ሰራዊት
killings,
እዚህ በብስጭት ጉዳት እንዳያደርስ
and
መከላከል
we need
ያስፈልጋል።
to like army members, we need to
ሁለተኛ
protect them
ምንም ጥርጥር
maybe
የለውም ብዙ የተገዛ
against
ደግሞ
any
ነበረ።
revenge. And a second
የተፈለገ
one is
ያለበት
many
ያስፈልጋል።
had a role one way or the other in the evil acts perpetrated in the northern part of Ethiopia. So we have to learn from the experience in Maikandra. So because of these two reasons, actions have been made and would continue to look into this situation carefully.
የራሱ ድካም አለበት።
Winning a battle has its own negative
ጦርነቱን በከፍተኛ
consequences.
ጀግንነት
We
በብቃት
have
አሸንፈናል። ነገር ግን
had
ይሄ
a
ነገር ወደ ትዕቢትና ወደ
powerful
እብሪት ከወሰደን ጥፋት
victory,
ነው።
but if it creates pride and
የድል
arrogance on
አድራጊ
our
ዘፈን
part,
ማቆም አለብን።
then it would be destructive.
በእኔ እምነት ያሸነፈው እውነት ነው።
No, I believe it is truth that
ያሸነፈው
won.
የኢትዮጵያ እናቶች እንባና
It
ጸሎት
is
ነው።
the prayer and the
ሌላው
tears
ሰው
of the
humble መሆን
mothers
አለበት።
of Ethiopia. The rest of us need to be
humble መሆን
humble.
ማለት ላለመጥላት፣
We should not hate.
ስለ አሸናፊነት
We
ላለመዘመር፣
should not
ወደ ዋናው ውጊያ
engage
መግባት።
in
ዋናው ውጊያ ገና
victory
አልተነካም።
songs, because the major battle is in front of us.
ከድህነት
The
ራፍ
battle
ያልወጡ ሀገራት
against
ቢያንስ
poverty.
በ10 ዓመት አንዴ ውጊያ ይደግማሉ።
If we persist in poverty, we are doomed to engage in other battles in our paths. If Junta X is demolished, Junta Y would come into pass. If we are to come out of the history of war, we have to forge ahead in speed towards development and prosperity. So this spirit of conviction that Ethiopians showed in this battle must be repeated in the battle to come out of poverty. We need to come out of being paupers. We can change ourselves. We have the capacity, we have the clarity in agriculture, industry, in cities. We need to, it takes a process. Development can be done by Ethiopians themselves. Others can only support. We cannot prosper out of begging. So in order to avoid conflicts, ethnic conflicts, this should be a matter of history, and in a concerted manner we need to engage in our path of development and peace. The Ethiopian people must cooperate along these lines. Ethiopia may continue to prosper by the authority of the people, and its survival would be maintained, ensured by the concerted efforts of its people. Thank you. I want to thank His Excellency the Prime Minister for the adequate explanations he gave. Let's honorably see him off now. The second meeting, extraordinary meeting, is now adjourned.